Chapter 286. There was actually such a transcendental place in this world. She must have transmigrated to some insect world. Grandma, why is this place like this, like this? Xiao Bai's face was pale, his face full of shock. Maybe it's because the food in this place is so good that it's too nutritious? No matter how much surplus there was, it couldn't possibly grow like this, right? Let's go ahead and take a look. Zhu Yao instructed them to retract their own auras, and continued forward. The dense forest in front of them was becoming more and more spacious, and those giant insects were becoming fewer and fewer. Just as she was about to walk out, a huge demonic beast appeared in front of her. It had dorsal fins that looked like sharp blades on its back. Its body was like a lizard, but its claws were flowing with red light like lava. The cry was very strange. It sounded like someone was roaring at the top of their lungs. It wasn't sharp, but it was very ear-piercing. More importantly, she couldn't understand its voice. The air was filled with a restless and angry aura. The demon beast was still spitting fire in all directions, even though all it could see was a piece of charred land. What is this? Yiqing Song was stunned. He thought for a moment and said, I've never heard of such a demonic beast. I don't know what rank it is. Zhu Yao had never seen it either. Even during the beast wave back then, she had never seen this breed. Grandma, can this demonic beast be subdued? Little Tyrant asked. Zhu Yao's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know why, but she instinctively disliked this beastie. She faintly felt that it was different from the other demonic beasts, and she basically couldn't understand what it was roaring about. I'm not sure. She shook her head. The creatures here are too strange. It's better not to provoke them. Let's take a detour. Zhu Yao pointed to the side, and walked over from the dense forest at the side. He didn't know if it was because this demonic beast's rank was too low. It didn't notice it at all. But then, they encountered more and more demonic beasts, and they were all species that they had never seen before. They were strangely shaped, sometimes resembling some kind of beast, but their attributes, size, and the position of their claws were different. These demonic beasts each occupied a territory, and there was no exception. They were all very irritable. They were not setting the forest on fire. They were digging rocks and were hostile to everything that came near them. She had once wanted to talk to an orc, but she was almost pierced by the icicle it spat out. He fled for dozens of miles. Zhu Yao finally confirmed that her world-favorable impression ability was useless against these strange beasts. The doubts in his heart grew stronger and stronger. He vaguely felt that there was something strange about this world, but it was still lacking a connection. He couldn't figure it out no matter how hard he tried. Granny, there seems to be something up ahead? Yiqing Song pointed at the horizon. Zhu Yao took a closer look. As expected, it was in the distance, close to the horizon. Another thin white line was hanging below it. It was as if the sky had opened a double eyelid. Let's go take a look. Zhu Yao summoned her sword, and flew in that direction. The two of them and the pea quickly followed. Only when he flew closer did he realize that it was the white line. It was actually a glowing translucent white wall. The wall was like a gradient layer, and the part connected to the ground was pure white. The higher they went, the fainter they became. It was in the shape of an encirclement, surrounding a large area of land. There seemed to be a tall palace inside. It was like a huge enchantment that surrounded everything inside. Golden talisman characters floated on the wall. Zhu Yao subconsciously felt that the answer regarding this strange land was inside this wall. This seems to be a very ancient Great Mountain Barrier formation. Little Tyrant glanced at the talisman on it. You've seen it before? Zhu Yao was a little surprised. Little Bai frowned. I once saw it mentioned in a certain scripture in the sect. It's called the White Sunrise Formation. I heard that this formation is unbreakable, and the center of the formation core is within the formation, so it's basically impossible to break it. However, this formation can only defend and not attack. You mean we can't enter? Little Tyrant nodded. This formation only has a single formation core, and it can only be opened from the inside. Formation core? Zhu Yao suddenly recalled a certain person's doo-doo. Maybe. Little Bai, did you bring a doo-doo? Pooey. I mean, do you have a defensive mystic artifact on you? Little Tyrant shook his head strongly. No matter if it was a doo-doo or a mystic artifact, he did not have either. Zhu Yao then looked at Yi Qing-song. I don't have that kind of hobby either. He shook his head even harder. Zhu Yao. P at this crucial moment. A certain P leaped out and flew to a position parallel to her line of sight. Suddenly, with a whoa sound, it spat out a brick. Zhu Yao casually caught it. What's the meaning of throwing it at me? They're the ones who have lost their moral integrity, not me. Hey. A 7th-ranked mystic artifact. Yi Qing-song pointed at the brick in her hand with a shocked expression. Zhu Yao raised her head to take a look. The hell? It really was a 7th-ranked defensive mystic artifact. So what P threw was not a brick, but an iPhone Plus. However, she was unable to use a 7th-ranked mystic artifact either. She was currently just a foundation trash. P, do you have anything of a lower rank? P called out once again. With another whoa sound, he spat out a 6th-rank brick. Just how much do you love bricks? It's still too high rank. Do you have anything of a lower rank? P, a 5th-rank brick. Any lower? P, a 3rd-rank brick. This will do. Zhu Yao carried the 4 bricks of various ranks, and in an instant, she felt as though she had bought everything from iPhone Plus 1 to 6. Come. Don't be courteous. One for each of you. With a flip of her hand, she stuffed the few bricks to the 2 youths at the side, and only kept the 3rd-rank brick. P. The P suddenly called out again, and once again opened its mouth. There's still something for me? Zhu Yao excitedly opened her hands, preparing to receive the goods. Would it be an iPad this time? However, a fiery red doo-doo floated towards her. Zhu Yao, that the 2 youths. P. Seeing that she wasn't moving, the P made a few whoa sounds, and spat out a few pieces of clothing of various colors. The entire P wrote. Do you still want it? Do you still want it? You can even spit it out. Who wants this? Damn. What about the 2 youths behind her? Don't teach little kids bad things, hey. P. Zhu Yao covered the P's mouth, and her expression darkened. Enough. I know you're Doraemon now. This P's mouth was from the 4th dimension, right? It could spit out anything it wanted? In order to prevent it from spitting out any more immoral things, Zhu Yao immediately used the 3rd-ranked defensive mystic artifact as the core of the formation, and melted it into the formation. Bringing the 2 youths and the P, she charged in. Chapter 287. Little Tyrant, have we entered the barrier? Yes. Are you sure? I'm sure? The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. The trial clearing squad finally dodged those strangely shaped beasts outside, and successfully entered the barrier. Then they saw even more strangely shaped beasts. Flip's table. Why are there so many terrifying creatures? Ho, what are you looking at me for? Run. Zhu Yao threw the iPhone in her hands away with a wave of her hand. She nimbly rode on her sword, pulled along the 2 youths whose spiritual energy had long been depleted, and began another round of escape. In her heart, she had long cursed the person who set up the barrier a few hundred times. People set up barriers, not to protect something, but to hide something. This barrier was great though. She finally entered with much difficulty, and realized that the inside and outside were the same. She really wanted to ask the person who set up the barrier if he was so bored that his balls hurt, or bored that his balls hurt, or bored that his balls hurt. However, after madly flying for a few kilometers, Zhu Yao was no longer able to ponder such a profound question, because her balls hurt even if she did not have any balls. The spiritual energy in her body was already severely depleted. Not long later, she would not be able to hold on any longer. At this moment, a floating mountain faintly appeared in front of her, and spiritual light was actually flashing on top of the mountain. Ever since she came to this world, the spiritual energy had been extremely thin. This floating mountain actually had spiritual light on top of it. It could be seen just how dense the spiritual energy was. Zhu Yao did not ponder deeply, and immediately flew towards the floating mountain. The moment she landed, the dense spiritual energy in the surroundings surrounded her body, and even the fatigue on her body had dissipated quite a bit. Just as she was about to find a place to hide and recover her spiritual energy, Little Bai suddenly pointed behind her and said with a surprised look, "Grandma, look. The demonic beasts." She turned to look, only to see the large group of demonic beasts that were still chasing after them earlier suddenly stop 2 to 3 kilometers away from the floating mountain. They no longer approached, and simply roared furiously towards the inside. What's wrong with them? Zhu Yao carefully sensed her surroundings. There aren't any formations blocking this spiritual mountain? Why don't they dare to approach? Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong exchanged glances as well. Perhaps there's something on this mountain that they're afraid of? Forget it. Zhu Yao sat cross-legged. This place is temporarily safe. Let's first recover our spiritual energy. This way, we'll be able to escape faster. The two youths nodded and sat down cross-legged. The pea rolled towards Zhu Yao, and suddenly let out a woo sound. He spat out 2 bottles. Doraemon was giving out benefits again. What's this? Zhu Yao picked up the bottle and shook it. Realizing that it was filled with liquid, she removed the cap. A fragrant aroma wafted out, instantly invigorating everyone's spirit. His spiritual power instantly recovered by 10%. Could it be the Spirit Spring Jade Nectar? Yi Qingsong was surprised. You know this? Yi Qingsong said. I have only heard about it from others. This is spring water condensed from spiritual energy. It's more than 100 times denser than ordinary spiritual energy. It's that mystical? Zhu Yao stroked the pea. You were sent by Ursa Major, right? Why do you have everything? Pea. The pea jumped and instantly jumped onto her lap. Also, Student Yi continued. This kind of spiritual water doesn't require one to absorb spiritual energy into one's body. Drinking it directly can instantly replenish one's spiritual energy. It was so useful. Wasn't that like mana potions in games? And it was an instant replenishment. She had to give it a try. But Student Yi tried his best to recall. I heard that the spiritual energy in this spiritual water is too strong. Usually a single drop is equivalent to a foundation practitioner, so I can't drink too much. Zhu Yao, who had already drunk it. Young man. Zhu Yao pulled Student Yi's collar. Do you know that breathing too much will kill you? I've already drunk an entire bottle, and you're telling me that I can only drink a single drop. I never expected Granny to drink it so quickly either. His face was filled with shock and self-blame. Granny, you finished it? What do you think? The hell? Do you think it's Oreos? You still have to lick and soak it first. Pooh, he puked out a mouthful of blood. Grandma. Granny. Zhu Yao seemed to have instantly sensed the spiritual energy in her body surging wildly towards her dantian. Zhu Yao did not have the time to argue with him. She immediately entered a meditative state and began to digest the spiritual energy in her body. The two youths had no choice but to meditate at the side and began to guard her. Though there was a lot of spiritual energy in Zhu Yao's body, it was not like before when she guided spiritual energy into her body. The spiritual energy was much gentler and simply stayed obediently in her body, constantly charging into her meridians and dantian. Just like a very orderly traffic jam, the only thing that was constantly shrinking was the distance between the cars. No one walked into the emergency passageway, nor did they take a detour. Hence, though she felt that the expansion of her meridians was very uncomfortable, it was not like in the past, where her body was filled to the point of becoming a bloody mess. Instead, her cultivation began to rise in an organized, disciplined, and rhythmic manner. From the 5th level of foundation, to the 6th level, to the 7th level, all the way to the paragon of foundation. And she had not even digested a 10th of the bottle of spiritual water she drank. She decided to directly form her Azoth core, and converted all of the spiritual water in her body into spiritual energy in one go. Then she began to condense her Azoth core. To a person who had formed her Azoth core for the nth time, it was just like a university graduate returning to take a primary school exam. It was simply too easy, and her Azoth core began to condense as well. However, the strange thing was that the transparent spiritual chi that had been staying in her body had also directly melted into the golden core. At first, she didn't feel anything unusual, but when the golden core took shape, She found that the golden core, which should have been colorful, had turned into a transparent glass ball. Could it be that the effect of that strange spiritual energy was to die? Unfortunately, she no longer had the time to think about it. Because after the pill was formed, the spiritual energy in her body was still skyrocketing, all the way to golden core paragon. Only 80% of the spiritual energy in the spring water had been used up. So the question is, should she continue to form her nascent soul? He died from the explosion of his spiritual energy. But if she wanted to directly form her nascent soul, this little bit of spiritual aura was far from enough. Moreover, she had just formed her gold core. If she directly broke her gold core to form her nascent soul and drew the spiritual aura into her body again, his weak meridians couldn't withstand it, so he couldn't succeed at all. Unable to advance or retreat. Was this the price of being a foodie? She would rather be 3 kilograms heavier. The spiritual energy was becoming more and more abundant. Even if she tried her best to suppress the soaring spiritual energy, she was unable to stop the intense pain in her meridians and dantian. It's over. It seemed like she was really going to be eaten to death by herself this time. P. Suddenly, the pea that had been quietly lying on her leg called out. In a flash, she could faintly hear the chanting of some mystic art in her mind. The pea began to emit a green light. She simply felt the spiritual energy that had been congested in her meridians was instantly being extracted towards the outside, into the pea's body. A moment later, the pain in her body completely disappeared, and her meridians returned to normal as well. It was as though she had been constipated for several days. As though she had been fed a laxative, her entire body felt comfortable, and her mind felt refreshed. After surviving a calamity, she definitely had to eat more Oreos in the future. She took a deep breath. Waking up from her meditative state, she looked at the pea that had grown by a size on her leg. Her heart was filled with excitement. PP, tell me honestly, do you have another name? Your surname is Dola, and your name is a dream. B dream is fine as well. The mysterious PP's reply was burp. He let out a resounding burp. Grandma. Little Tyrant ran over with an excited look. Grandma, I'm here. Grandma, you're awake. I thought. Fortunately, you formed your Azoth core. Zhu Yao stroked his head. Don't worry. Grandma's life is tough. Looking at it, this was the easiest time she had formed her Azoth core. How long have I been meditating for? 5 days. Little Tyrant said. Zhu Yao was stunned. 5 days. Then you. Didn't that mean he had been starving for 7 to 8 days straight? Grandma, don't worry. I still have one last grain-abstaining pellet. Furthermore, when you formed your Azoth core, the surrounding spiritual energy was extremely dense, and my cultivation had increased as well. Zhu Yao took a closer look. As expected, he had already reached the essence paragon level, and he was just a little bit away from successfully building his foundation. Not bad, little fellow. She patted on his shoulder. Oh right, where's Yiqing Song? Little Tyrant was startled for a moment, as he looked behind her. Junior Marshal Brother is still meditating. His tone carried a little envy. 2 days ago, when Grandma formed her Azoth core, Junior Marshal Brother, Yi comprehended a strand of the heavenly Tao, so he entered a meditative state as well. He directly advanced from the 5th level of essence to the 8th level. As expected of the male lead, even watching someone form their Azoth core, he was able to increase his cultivation. Junior Marshal Brother Ye's aptitude isn't much, but his comprehension abilities are exceptional. Even I cannot compare to him. After saying that, he once again glanced at Yiqing Song. Zhu Yao could faintly see a hint of loneliness in his eyes, as she heavily patted on his shoulder. Little Tyrant, what are you thinking about? Are you envious of him? His expression stiffened, and his gaze drifted for a moment. He is indeed very incredible. You only see his current incredible strength, but you did not see the pain he suffered in the past. Zhu Yao forcefully stroked his head. This child, Little Tyrant, had been an inner sect disciple since young, and his aptitude was considered to be excellent as well. However, he was left alone by his master, and there had always been a lack of elders to guide him by his side. Hence, his personality was extremely headstrong. Just by looking at the fact that among his peers in the inner sect, there was no one whose cultivation was faster than his, she could tell. Suddenly seeing Yi Qingsong, who was leveling up like a rocket, it was unavoidable for him to feel unbalanced. Furthermore, the other party was someone with pentaspirit veins, so it was normal for him to have doubts about himself. However, if these doubts were to be buried forever, it might very well turn into a form of inferiority complex. She did not wish for this imbalance to become a knot in his heart in the future. Listen to me, little tyrant. Zhu Yao sighed. Do you think that Yi Qingsong, with his pentaspirit veins, is very impressive for him to rise from the first level of essence to the 8th level of essence in a short half a month? Amen, he obediently nodded. Then how long did you take? 3 years. And he had cultivated every single day, and did not dare to slack off, which was why he had such a speed. Then what about when you advanced from the first level of essence to the second level? Zhu Yao continued to ask. Little tyrant was startled, as he looked at her a little strangely. The first 3 levels of essence are extremely easy. As long as one knows how to take in spiritual energy, one can usually reach the 3rd level within half a month. Back then, I naturally only used 2 days to reach the 2nd level. Oh. Zhu Yao pointed to Yi Qingsong on the ground. But he used 5 years. Little tyrant was stunned for a moment. After regaining his senses, he retorted. That's different. How is it different? Little tyrant was speechless. Indeed. Mortal disciples usually entered the sect at the age of 10, and a few days ago, Yi Qingsong was only at the first level of essence. In other words, he had indeed spent 5 years. Little tyrant. Zhu Yao said with a serious look. That's why I said you only saw his current achievements, but did not see the glory behind. He had similarly put in many years of hard work. You're the same age as him, but you're already at the essence paragon level, while he's only at the 8th level. He's the one who should be envious, not you. Bai Ziyuan lowered his head and pondered for a moment. He seemed to have understood something, yet he was still a little unclear. Furthermore, Zhu Yao continued. You're envious of him advancing from the first level of essence to the 8th level of essence in just a few days? Why aren't you envious of me advancing from the middle stages of foundation to the Azoth Paragon in just 5 days? Little tyrant instantly widened his eyes. Zhu Yao smiled. She pinched his cheeks and pulled them to the sides. Little tyrant, what's important isn't to be envious of what others have but what you possess. Look at yourself more. Your Tao relies on yourself, and not others. No matter how outstanding he is, he won't be able to help you walk your life. Little tyrant fiercely raised his head to look at her. The perplexed look on his face slowly disappeared, and his eyes grew brighter as well. Compared to before, it was even clearer. A smile slowly surfaced on that face that still carried a little childishness. He nodded at her. Grandma, little Bai understands. Only then did Zhu Yao heave a sigh of relief. She understood the feelings of other people's children very well. She had been living in this kind of shadow since young. Wait a minute. Other people's children. Zhu Yao's eyes shone, and she was instantly excited. The hell? She knew how to deal with the bug this time. So that's how it is. Granny. Yi Qingsong had just woken up, and he respectfully greeted her. Hi, other peoples. Apui little Tsong. When she thought of the solution, she instantly felt that the male protagonist was much more pleasing to the eye. Speaking of which, P. Just as Zhu Yao was about to speak, P interrupted. He squeezed himself between the two of them, and rubbed against her chest as though he was acting spoiled. Zhu Yao simply felt her hands sinking, and her legs trembled, almost causing her to fall. When did this P become so fat? She couldn't even carry him anymore. P. He bounced around, and Zhu Yao felt as though her hands were about to break. Yet he suddenly flew out of her embrace, flew in a certain direction for a while, and then flew back. Was he telling them to go in that direction? What's over there? P. Zhu Yao frowned. Summoning her flying sword, she called out to the 2 good youths, and then followed P in that direction. She wondered what the P had discovered, but she had to head over to take a look. It might be the exit. Earlier, when they entered, they flew straight to the mountain peak, while the direction the pea was bringing them was towards the bottom of the mountain. Halfway through their flight, Zhu Yao was startled, and with a crack she stopped in midair. "Grandma?" The two little ones curiously turned their heads. Zhu Yao clenched her fists and solemnly said, "Set up a defensive barrier, hurry." The smell of blood. She smelled a very thick stench of blood. Even back then in the battlefield of gods and devils, she had never smelled such a thick stench. And the instant that stench spread, she even felt a sense of sorrow that was about to suffocate her. That emotion came very mysteriously, and her heart felt as though it was being tightly gripped by someone in an instant, causing her to feel an indescribable pain. It was as though there was something waiting for her at the end of her journey, something that would cause her great sorrow. P.S. I was called to work overtime today, so I didn't have the time to write. That's why I'm updating a little late. Most likely, there's no hope in adding more chapters. Everyone, let's not wait anymore. Chapter 288. Zhu Yao saw a red lake. It was a bright red, and everything in the surroundings was dyed red. On the surface of the lake, there were many golden formations floating. The formations seemed to be restraining something, and a portion of them would occasionally protrude out. The closer they got, the thicker the stench of blood became. Even with the aura-concealing formations in the surroundings, they could not stop the thick stench. Only then did they realize that this wasn't a water-colored lake, it was clearly a lake of blood. The surface of the lake was calm, as though it had long solidified. Its color was so red that it was tinged with black. This was not a lake that was dyed red by blood, but a lake of blood that was formed from blood. This is... The three of them were dumbfounded. Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong could not help but turn around and puke. Zhu Yao suddenly felt a piercing pain in the depths of her heart, and for a moment, her breathing became a little difficult. Just where did so much blood come from? "Grandma. Then, what's over there?" Little Tyrant suddenly pointed to the right. That was an empty patch of grass. However, a large amount of fresh blood was slowly flowing out from the center, converging into the lake of blood. Occasionally, the sky above the grass patch would suddenly distort. Zhu Yao frowned. There was a concealing formation there, and it wasn't very stable. She then cast an art and materialized a spiritual sword, slicing through the illusion. The grass patch was instantly like a curtain being pulled apart, revealing the hellish scene within. Corpses. There were corpses of various demonic beasts everywhere. Not a single one of the demonic beasts inside was complete. The ground was filled with severed limbs, and the ones at the very bottom had even begun to rot and stink. On top of the pile of corpses, there were still crippled beasts that were still breathing, roaring with all their might. In an instant, miserable cries resounded through the clouds, lingering endlessly. In the sky above the pile of corpses, there was a gigantic formation that was currently emitting out a blinding red light. When the demonic beasts encountered that red light, it was as though they had encountered the sharpest blade. Their bodies were forcefully sliced apart, and they were unable to escape. They could only let out miserable cries. This time she understood. They were screaming, "Kill me! Those demonic beasts!" There were 7th rank, 8th rank, and even 10th rank. However, within that gigantic formation, they were completely powerless, and could only be sliced apart. The three of them were stunned by this scene, and they could not believe their own eyes. Behind! Yi Qingsong trembled as he pointed at the back of the pile of corpses. Zhu Yao turned to look. Behind him, there were more than a dozen identical spirit arrays. However, these spirit arrays were double-layered. Under the red spell formation, there was also a white teleportation array. Suddenly, a few of the formations lit up. Not long after, bewildered demonic beasts appeared above the formation, and were swallowed by the red formation above their heads. In the end, he appeared on the huge pile of corpses and was cut alive. It's those formations that are sending demonic beasts in. Zhu Yao's heart was instantly filled with rage. He immediately summoned his spirit sword and flew out. Destroy those teleportation arrays. She immediately summoned the myriad sword array. He attacked the nearest few teleportation formation cores. The teleportation of the demonic beast was stopped. The two youths were stunned for a moment before they reacted. They all stepped forward to help destroy the formation cores of the other teleportation formations. This was the first time he had seen such a large-scale slaughter of demonic beasts. What exactly was that huge red array? There were more than 10 teleportation arrays, but because they were not offensive in nature, the 3 of them destroyed them in the blink of an eye. Without the teleportation formation, the corresponding red formation above them immediately collapsed. No more demonic beasts were teleported in. However, the few from before still landed in the pile of corpses. 7 to 8 demonic beasts were trapped under the formation, and a few of them even turned to look at Zhu Yao. Their eyes clearly carried a hint of panic and pleading for help. Zhu Yao's heart skipped a beat. She immediately attacked that strange gigantic formation. However, the moment her spirit sword came into contact with the formation, it was instantly shattered. The remaining force caused her hands to turn numb. Just what in the world was this formation? It had already begun to glow and activate. If she did not save them now, those demonic beasts would definitely die. Zhu Yao gritted her teeth and immediately summoned her sword intent. A gigantic lightning phoenix flew towards the formation. However, the moment it came into contact with the formation, it was instantly scattered and disappeared. Zhu Yao instantly felt a powerful backlash assaulting her. She felt a huge pain in her chest and puked out a mouthful of blood. "Grandma! Granny!" Bai Ziyuan and Yi Qingsong exclaimed and hurriedly rushed over. That gigantic formation grew even brighter. Rays of red light shone down on the demonic beasts, and like laser weapons, they sliced at the demonic beasts' bodies. Zhu Yao fiercely widened her eyes as she struggled to get up. "I have to save them." The moment she stood up, she puked out several mouthfuls of blood. She could faintly hear the sound of her Azoth core shattering. She had never suffered such a huge backlash before, as though the sword intent was being reflected back onto her body several times over. "Grandma." Little Tyrant pulled her hand and said with a tragic look, "It's too late." In the next moment, terrifying screams of pain entered her ears, causing her heart to tremble. The limbs of those demonic beasts that had just entered were being sliced apart inch by the red light. Cries of pain and cries for help entered her ears one after another. Zhu Yao had never thought that being able to understand the words of demonic beasts would be such a painful thing. They were all crying out in pain, and they were all pleading for her help. She was unable to do anything. She couldn't even turn her head around or cover her ears. She could only watch as those demonic beasts were sliced into pieces, their flesh a bloody mess. Those pairs of pure eyes, from the initial panic, fear, and pleading, turned into complete despair. Only when there were no longer any signs of life did the gigantic formation finally stop. She could even clearly see a beastie reaching out its remaining claw towards her, as it whimpered out a tuneless meow. In an instant, Zhu Yao could not even find her own breath. A feeling of helplessness engulfed her entire body, and the depths of her heart were instantly filled with an unbearable sourness. She felt that even breathing had become difficult, and it was as though the screams of the beasties were still echoing in her ears. Just what kind of terrifying formation was this? However, the nightmare did not stop at all. "Grandma." Little Tyrant's expression instantly paled. Trembling, he pointed in the direction they came from. On top of the blood lake. When she turned back to look, the few formations that were quietly floating above the blood lake earlier suddenly activated, and something was currently rising from above. Not even an instant later, strange-looking demonic beasts appeared one after another, roaring as they flew away from the floating peak. Zhu Yao was startled in her heart, as she fiercely turned to look at the pile of corpses. As expected, the dismembered limbs seemed to have decreased a little, and the pile of corpses had become a little lower. There were also a few special formations. The dismembered body parts of the demonic beasts would occasionally disappear into the formations. She simply felt a tingle in her mind. Ever since she saw the bug, she felt a strange feeling. She suddenly understood. Those strange-looking demonic beasts that seemed to lack any intelligence, yet were unexpectedly violent. Could they be assemblage beasts, refined using formations? This thought was too crazy. How was that possible? In the world of cultivation, why would there be a plot that could only be seen in sci-fi movies? Could it be that this strange land was also a certain science? No, wait. Was it a Jurassic-era world created by a strange deity? It seems like a few little mice have snuck in. A deep male voice suddenly sounded above her head. Zhu Yao simply felt her heart skipping a beat. In the next moment, she was directly pressed onto the ground by a powerful pressure. She could not move her entire body, and her Azoth core had even cracked apart inch by inch. Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong did not need to be mentioned. They immediately puked out blood and fell onto the ground, if not for the defensive barrier they had set up earlier. And Zhu Yao desperately transferred a strand of spiritual energy over to protect their Dantian. They most likely would have died on the spot. This was actually the pressure of a demigod. The hell? That deity arts madman was actually a demigod scholar. The sound of footsteps approached from afar. A moment later, she was able to clearly see that it was a man in his 20s. His appearance was rather feminine, and carried a hint of femininity. However, the space between his brows was filled with viciousness. He coldly looked at the three people on the ground, and with a cold laugh, he lightly muttered, "It's been a long time since I've seen a living person in this Bujo land of mine. A mere Azoth core and 2 Essence disciples are able to barge their way here. They can be considered to be quite capable." Who was this person? The man turned to look at the pile of corpses, and his eyes swept past the dozen or so destroyed teleportation formations. His brows instantly furrowed, and his voice instantly turned cold. Killing intent flashed past. "You people actually destroyed my formations. You deserve death." The pressure on his body instantly grew a little heavier. The cracks on Zhu Yao's Azoth core were even more than the wrinkles on her face. That man walked towards them in large strides. Suddenly he reached out his hand and grabbed Zhu Yao's neck, lifting her up. "What are you doing?" Little Tyrant's expression turned anxious. Gritting his teeth, he raised his head. "Let go of her." "Let go?" He coldly laughed. His eyes were like a snake's, sizing her up for a moment. The corner of his lips split open, revealing a sinister smile. "How can I let go of such a great material? I have never tried using a human body to refine a beast, and today is the perfect day to do so." Refine a beast? Little Tyrant was startled for a moment, and then he instantly understood. "Those strange demonic beasts outside were refined by you? It seems like you're not too stupid after all." The man coldly said. "Unfortunately, those are just failed products. Perhaps you might succeed if you add in a human practitioner. You sacrifice so many demonic beasts? Just what are you trying to refine?" Zhu Yao struggled to ask. The man glanced at her, but did not reply. Turning around, he dragged Zhu Yao towards the pile of corpses, as though he was really planning to refine her into a demonic beast. Zhu Yao's heart clenched. No matter how she struggled, she was unable to break free from his control. "Grandma! Granny!" Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong wanted to come over, but they did not even have the strength to climb up. Zhu Yao had no choice but to use all of her strength to gather the spiritual energy in her body, and temporarily resist his pressure. Grabbing onto his hand, she immediately materialized a bolt of lightning and attacked him. The man instinctively loosened his grip and took 2 steps back. He was directly struck by her 5-elemental heavenly lightning, yet not the slightest injury could be seen on his body. Fortunately, the pressure had disappeared. "Hurry and leave. Immediately." Zhu Yao took this opportunity to shout at the 2 people behind her. Circulating all of the spiritual energy in her body, she once again summoned her sword intent. Encountering such an overwhelming enemy, she had no choice but to risk her life. "Grandma!" Little Tyrant still wanted to say something, but he was pulled away by Yi Qingsong on his flying sword. He understood Zhu Yao's intentions. He would only be a burden if he stayed here. At the same time, the lightning phoenix soared into the sky, and a long cry pierced through the skies. The man raised his head and glanced at the sword intent. As though he was startled for a moment, a hint of astonishment flashed past his face. "Phoenix?" He merely hesitated for a second, before immediately releasing the pressure from his body once again. He coldly laughed. "Humph, insignificant tricks." Just as he was about to scatter her sword intent, he suddenly felt a powerful surge of spiritual energy beside him. He fiercely widened his eyes and looked at Zhu Yao. "You're going to self-destruct." That's right. Zhu Yao did not want to use her sword intent to fight him. She had planned to self-destruct her Azoth core in the first place. The difference in their levels was too huge. No matter how heaven-defying she was, an Azoth core could not defeat a demigod. What she could do was to buy time for those two to leave as soon as possible. Though self-destructing her Azoth core could not kill a demigod sovereign, it was still possible to injure him a little and prevent him from chasing after her. Zhu Yao had already gathered all of the spiritual energy in her body and was prepared to self-destruct in an instant. "If you want to self-destruct, you have to see if I agree to it or not." The man coldly snorted. Suddenly, he struck his palm on her chest, and in an instant, a strange formation appeared in his palm. Zhu Yao simply felt the spiritual energy that was about to self-destruct instantly dissipate. Her Azoth core shattered with a bang, and her sword intent instantly dissipated as well. Not only did the remnant energy from the explosion not explode, it had instead returned to her body, severing all of her meridians. The hell, what kind of formation is this? Why is it even able to stop self-destruction? This is definitely not a divine art. Immense pain instantly engulfed her entire body. Zhu Yao simply felt her vision turning dark, and in the next moment she fainted. The man laughed in disdain. Raising his head, he looked at the two people who had already flown far away, yet he did not immediately chase after them. In any case, he would not be able to escape. In any case, he turned around and walked towards the pile of corpses. Raising his hand, he was just about to throw the woman in his hand into it. Suddenly, a ray of green light, carrying with it an oppressive might, shot straight towards him. The man was startled. In an instant, he let go of the person in his hand and hurriedly retreated several tens of meters. However, it was already too late. With a swoosh, a sharp sword ray instantly pierced through his body. The man puked out a mouthful of blood. "Who's there?" A chill suddenly rose from the depths of his heart as he looked at Zhu Yao, who had already fainted on the ground. Her entire body was currently surrounded by a ring of green light, and she slowly floated up. The light grew brighter, and after a flash, she suddenly disappeared, as though she had never appeared in the first place. The man took a few deep breaths with lingering fear in his heart. A few traces of blood once again flowed out from the corner of his lips, and his expression grew even darker. Suddenly, like a cassette tape, his figure distorted for a moment. Gritting his teeth, a hint of ruthlessness flashed past his eyes. A moment later, he disappeared from the spot. In a hidden underground cave, Zhu Yao, who was wrapped in a green light, suddenly appeared. The light on her body slowly faded away, converging into a green ball. The green ball rolled to her side and quietly stayed there for a moment, as though it was searching for something. A long while later, the green ball's body suddenly emitted out a white glow. A sigh could be heard. Chapter 289. The beam grew brighter and brighter. After a while, a layer of white light floated up from the sphere and slowly condensed into a shape. Not long after, a figure in snow-white clothes appeared in the cave. His entire body was emitting a cold aura. When he saw the person on the ground who only had one breath left, the coldness on his body seemed to solidify. Even the entire underground cave began to condense with white frost. P. The pea on the ground suddenly called out and weakly rolled away. Only then did Yu Yen, who was on the verge of exploding out, forcefully suppress his anger. If not for the limited time, and the fact that he was worried about his disciple's injury, he really wanted to go back and settle the score with a certain someone. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward to help his stupid disciple up. Curling his fingers on her wrist, he began to examine her injuries. The more he looked, the deeper his brows furrowed. The coldness in his body grew stronger, and the more he wanted to go out and beat that person up. Her meridians were shattered, her golden core was shattered, and her dantian was shattered. Not a single part of her body was intact. It had to be said that it was a miracle that his disciple could hold on and not change his avatar. If he hadn't arrived in time, she probably wouldn't have been able to keep her breath. Yu Yan's expression sank even further. Sitting cross-legged behind her, he took a deep breath. In an instant, a white dragon flew out from his body and began to coil around his disciple in front of him. With every place it passed, the injuries in Zhu Yao's body would begin to automatically recover. First were her meridians, then her dantian, and then her internal organs. Just as he was about to help her condense her gold core, spiritual aura began to circulate and compress on its own, showing signs of forming her gold core. Yu Yan widened his eyes in shock. His disciple's body could actually form her own Azoth core. He frowned and recalled the white dragon. Then he raised his hand and set up a few formations. He turned his head to look at the green ball beside him, who was standing there quietly. Spirit spring water. Daodu immediately spat out a bottle. He helped his disciple drink half a bottle, and used his spiritual energy to dissolve the spring water in her body. Immediately, the 5 elemental spiritual qi was directed into the core formation area. As if it could operate on its own, it began to compress and form a golden core. Not long after, a new golden core was formed. After carefully examining his disciple's injuries, he heaved a sigh of relief when he discovered that there were no major problems. However, his stupid disciple still hadn't woken up. Yu Yan sized up his unconscious disciple, and when he saw that blood-stained dress, he could not help but frown. As a good teacher with mysophobia, he absolutely could not tolerate his disciple being so dirty. He casually cast a dirt removal spell on her. The long dress immediately returned to its original dark green color. He took another look and still felt that something was amiss. Thus, he casually combed his disciple's messy hair again. He took another look. It still felt weird. Thus, he casually changed the shoe that was covered in dust. When he looked at it again, he still felt awkward. Yes, it was definitely the dark green clothes' fault. His disciples used to wear white or pink. Should he change into another set of clothes? Hence, Zhu Yao, who had been unconscious for 6 hours due to her heavy injuries, when she opened her eyes, not only did she realize that her injuries were healed, and her pellet had recovered, she even saw her own master, who looked like a sacred lotus on a snowy mountain. He was acting like a rogue in front of her with a serious face. Master, I am an old man. I know. Then why are you so serious? Take off your clothes. With a swish, he pulled open her belt. His movements were smooth and well-trained. It was obvious that she had taught them well. Master, Zhu Yao exclaimed. Although she was happy, she had to wait for me to reconstruct my body. Turn back into a young lady first. This is a little too heavy, isn't it? As an old cow that eats young grass, I'm under a lot of pressure, alright? Under his disciple's confused and flustered expression, a certain master quickly stripped off her clothes. Then he picked up the white clothes that Peepee had just spat out, and put them back on his disciple. He even carefully smoothed out every single crease on her clothes, before letting her go in satisfaction. Throughout the entire process he did not look sideways, and there was not the slightest bit of abnormality in his eyes. Only then did Zhu Yao regain her senses. Oh, so it was because he couldn't stand this tattered cloth of hers. Why didn't he say so earlier? She thought that her master suddenly had some sort of special fetish. She knew it. How could her master possibly like an old woman? Wait a minute. Why did she feel even more unhappy? Master, why are you here? She clearly remembered that spiritual realm had teleported him back to Lightning Divine Hall. How did you descend to the lower realm? Do you remember the pearl you placed on your master back then? Pearl? Zhu Yao pondered for a moment. You're talking about the pearl that the River of Forgetfulness gave me? Amen. What does this have to do with master descending to the lower realm? Yu Yan flipped his hand, and the image of a white pearl appeared in his palm. Then, do you feel that this white pearl is a little familiar? Zhu Yao looked at it a little strangely, and her eyes suddenly widened. If her master did not mention it, she would not have any impression of it. Now that she had a closer look, she realized that this pearl was too familiar. So familiar that she had seen a bunch of them before. Isn't this Bai Yuan's inner core? This pearl was exactly the same as the inner core that Bai Yuan had forcefully stuffed into her hands. Wait a minute. Realm Spirit had once said that this pearl was the purest source of water. the river of forgetfulness. It could dissolve and cleanse everything. And Bai Yuan was the source of the river of forgetfulness. The hell, it was no wonder it could spit out so many inner cores. The river of forgetfulness connects the three realms, guiding all souls. Bai Yuan naturally has the ability to cross worlds as well. Yu Yin said, both you and I have its inner core, so I can naturally sense your situation. However, even with this item, I can only split a strand of my divine sense to descend to the lower realm. Zhu Yao looked at it carefully. Her master's figure was indeed not as solid as before. Her master's original body was still in the divine realm. Then master's divine sense is currently residing in Bai Yuan's inner core? Amen. I remember I placed Bai Yuan's inner core in my divine sense. That's not right, I basically can't cultivate my divine sense right now. Then the inner core is P. The P suddenly flew up, and just like before, it wanted to pounce into her embrace. However, it was intercepted by Yu Yan and was pulled back. He had finally cleaned up his disciple after much difficulty. He could not allow it to be dirted by some random thing, not even the P. Master, it's just a P. If you pinch it any further, it will shatter. It was originally a P with a smooth round P, but now, wait a minute. Round P? Why does this shape look so similar? Bai Yuan. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Master, this can't be. The inner core that Bai Yuan gifted you. The hell? The P was Bai Yuan's inner core. Then how in the world did it run into the P pod? And even dyed its entire body in color? Here comes the problem. Bai Yuan's inner core was equivalent to the P. And her master had always been attached to the P's body. Then her master was equivalent to. Your injuries are already fine, let's go. Yu Yan pulled his disciple's hand and walked out. Wait a minute. Zhu Yao's expression darkened. Master, can you first explain about the doo-doo? Yu Yan was startled for a moment, and then said with a stern look. Yours. Nonsense. This old lady has never worn. Apui. I'm wearing undergarments. In order to maintain her originally small bun shape, she had never worn this type of doo-doo, which could not maintain its shape or quality. Yu Yan frowned. Sighing. He looked as though he was planning to have a long conversation. That day, after I returned to Lightning Divine Hall, I coincidentally bumped into Master coming out of closed-door training. Was he trying to change the topic? I reported the matter of you and me engaging in doo-doo cultivation to Master. Oh. What did this have to do with doo-doo? Master said, if we want to engage in doo-doo cultivation, we have to get married officially. And then, Master said, in the wedding dress I prepared for you, there's a doo-doo missing. Grandmaster, aren't you investigating a little too carefully? Master said that all women have to wear this. Grandmaster, aren't you investigating a little too carefully? Master said that all women have to wear this. So I hurriedly made a few. It turned out that the pile of different colored underwear was her dowry. So that pile of different colored doo-doo was actually her dowry. Yu Yan sighed and then said, Master doesn't know either. Clearly we all looked the same. They all looked exactly the same. Swish, swish, swish. 5 steel blades pierced straight into her chest. Flips table. How are they the same? Little steamed buns are also breasts, hey. So he had never made doo-doo for her in the past. Was it because he thought she had no use for them? Only later did Zhu Yao find out that she did not leave that floating mountain. Instead, she entered the floating mountain. The entire floating mountain was actually hollow. They simply turned a corner, walked out of that cave, and in front of them was an empty room. Her master was currently just a strand of divine sense, and he could not maintain his human form for too long. He had no choice but to return to Bai Yuan's inner core. Probably because he had entered the pod. The inner core itself possessed Bai Yuan's consciousness as well. In other words, the current P was actually Bai Yuan. Her master said that this place was not the world she was in back then. Most likely, it was a secret realm, or a mustard seed dimensional space. Back then, when Bai Yuan swallowed them in, he had actually sliced open the void, and coincidentally sent them over. In other words, if she wanted to return, she had to find the exit of the secret realm, or have Bai Yuan swallow them again. She had initially planned to look for Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong, but her master told her that their presences were inside the floating mountain. Zhu Yao's heart clenched. She could not help but worry. Those two little ones couldn't have been captured by that mystic, right? The moment she recalled how that person had once wanted to refine them into that kind of hybrid beast, she felt a chill. They haven't been captured. Yu Yan's voice sounded from the P. That person was injured by him earlier, so it was impossible for him to recover so quickly, let alone capture them. The positions of the two of them have been constantly moving. They should be looking for you as well. The hell, these two brats, they're a little too gutsy, aren't they? They actually dare to return? She sighed, and then walked towards the direction her master was pointing at. Yao. The formations here are strange, and even I am unable to completely sense the danger. Be more careful. Zhu Yao's feet paused. Master can't recognize what formations this is either? Amen. His voice sank. Your master has never seen those formations before either, and the circulation of spiritual energy is extremely unique. It's as though there's a unique energy contained within. Unique energy? What's that? It's not divine energy, nor is it spiritual energy. Your master is unable to differentiate it either. You have to be careful. Her master's voice grew weaker, until it completely disappeared. She called out a few times, but there was no response. Her master was just a strand of divine sense, and the amount of time he could appear was extremely limited. She did not know when he would be able to appear again. Zhu Yao could not help but feel a little anxious. She placed down a defensive barrier in advance, and only then did she head towards the depths. The interior of this floating mountain was extremely huge. She had initially thought that there would be a palace inside, but unexpectedly, the rooms were extremely simple and crude. It was as though they were randomly dug out. Though the place was huge, it did not have any regular shape. A few unpleasant smells drifted in the air, and it was a little similar to the smell of that pile of corpses earlier. The deeper she went, the bigger the space became. She was about to lose sight of the ceiling. The surroundings grew darker and darker, and it would be great if there was some light. Just as she was thinking that, the light of a formation suddenly flashed in her surroundings. Not even a moment later, it was as though the entire wall was suddenly filled with glowing electric wires, and intersecting red lines filled the entire place. In an instant, the entire space lit up, and it was as though a red cloud had been ignited in the surroundings. The rays of light shot straight upwards, and when she took a closer look, she could even see flowing lights flashing within, as though they were growing upwards. Zhu Yao raised her head to look at this bizarre scene, and was a little stunned. Why did she feel that the shape of this red light looked a little like a tree? However, it was growing upside down. Suddenly, something came piercing through the air. The moment Zhu Yao regained her senses, dozens of spiritual swords flew towards her. She immediately materialized wind blades to block them, and then hurriedly retreated backwards. The other side seemed to have paused for a moment, and then a joyful voice immediately sounded. Grandma. Granny. Two figures ran out from behind the red light. They were Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong. Are you two all right? She did not expect to encounter the two of them so quickly. She sized up the two youths. They're fine. They're not missing any limbs. We're fine. Little Tyrant heaved a heavy sigh of relief. What about you, Grandma? We sneaked back to that beast refinement place, but we couldn't find you. We even thought. Fortunately, you're fine. My ass. Why did you two come back? Zhu Yao glared at them. We finally managed to buy some time for you two to escape, yet you still came back to seek death? Little Tyrant frowned. His face was filled with disapproval. Gritting his teeth, he resolutely said, In any case, I can't abandon Grandma. Even if I die, it's the same. Yo, he's pretty loyal. Are you stupid? Zhu Yao raised her hand and knocked him, rolling her eyes. Who said you could abandon me? If you leave, you can return to find reinforcements. At the very least, you'll still have a chance to live. Now that you're back, fine. If you die, it'll be the same. Little Tyrant's expression stiffened, and his righteous expression completely collapsed. I didn't think that much. That's why I said you're stupid. Zhu Yao could not be bothered to lecture a brainless child like him, so she immediately said, Enough nonsense. Let's hurry and leave, before we're discovered. She was really afraid that the mystic arts madman would pop out again. Her master did not respond again. If that person were to appear again, it would basically be a group wipe. Zhu Yao pondered in her heart, and immediately brought the two little ones along, heading in the direction they came from. Just as she took a step out, her vision suddenly turned dark. Why did the red light disappear? She casually asked. The two little ones were startled. What red light? Chapter 290. Didn't you see that red light earlier? It looked like a tree? The two little ones shook their heads. Grandma, it's completely dark here, and we can't even see clearly. We only recognized you because of your voice earlier. We didn't see any red light along the way? Then what did she see? Was she seeing things? Zhu Yao faintly felt that something was amiss, no matter if it was the strange formation earlier, or that red light. Let's head out first. No matter what, she had to leave this floating mountain first. She immediately brought the two little ones back the way they came. She did not enter too deep, as long as she turned into that path. The hell, where's the path? Earlier, they clearly came from this direction, yet now, she could only see a stone wall. There was basically no path at all. Granny? Yi Qingsong asked doubtfully. The hell? Zhu Yao wanted to curse out. We're trapped. Her master said that there were many unknown formations here. Now that she thought about it, they might have been trapped in a formation the moment they entered this mountain. Grandma, what do we do now? Little Tyrant frowned. A hint of worry surfaced on his face. They could only take it one step at a time. Set up a defensive barrier and follow behind me. Be careful. The two little ones nodded. They summoned their flying swords and cautiously followed behind her. Zhu Yao looked around, and suddenly realized that the glowing red line earlier had once again appeared beneath her feet, extending straight towards a certain direction. Was this pointing the way for her? She pondered for a moment, and then cast a fire-type mystic art. Only then did the surroundings brighten up a little, and she carefully followed that path. Right now, she had no choice but to take a look. The further she walked, the wider the surroundings became. There seemed to be some sort of dripping sound. The unpleasant smell in the air had dissipated quite a bit. She could even faintly smell the fragrance of plants. For some reason, she suddenly felt a sense of unease in the depths of her heart. This fragrance, it felt as though she had smelled it somewhere before. Yao, stop. Her master's voice suddenly sounded in the depths of her heart. Zhu Yao was shocked, and her feet stopped. A few meters in front of her, suddenly, a large amount of purple flames ignited for no reason. Even the mountain rocks at the side were instantly melted. Grandma. Little Tyrant pulled her. He immediately pulled her several steps away. This is... The three of them were stunned. They had never seen a flame of this color before. What was even stranger was that they didn't feel any heat at all. Zhu Yao's heart was in a mess. A thought flashed through his mind. He felt like he was about to recall something, but he couldn't grasp it. The purple flame burned for an entire hour, and then it was as if it had never appeared. It disappeared. A blood-red mark suddenly appeared on the ground. Why does this painting look so much like a bird? Little Tyrant voiced out. Yi Qingsong continued. It looks like a phoenix. Phoenix? Zhu Yao was startled. Taking a step forward, she carefully inspected the imprint, and simply felt her mind buzzing. The blood formation, the strange fragrance, the red threads and the purple flames that others couldn't see were instantly strung together. She broke into a run and ran forward. Damn. How could she forget this? Xiao Bai had clearly taught her this. Grandma. Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong exchanged glances. He immediately chased after them. Zhu Yao ran in the direction of that red thread. She had even used a mystic art and sprinted towards it. At the end of that red thread, she saw a gigantic phoenix diagram formed by several red threads converging on a gigantic stone wall. She looked at the diagram a little blankly. Divine Enchantment Guide. A guiding art unique to the phoenix race. Using one's primordial spirit as a guide, it would point the way. Only people the caster wished to see would be able to see it. It was no wonder the formation earlier was so powerful. It was no wonder there were endless demonic beasts being transported in just a few teleportation formations. It was no wonder no matter how high the rank of the beasts were, they couldn't resist that formation. That was a blood formation. A formation laid down using the blood of a god race. And that god race, please don't be the one she guessed. A slightly hoarse male voice suddenly sounded from behind the stone wall. Under the heavenly Tao, no one can resist it. Even the god race is no exception. Zhu Yao's heart sank. She immediately summoned her sword intent and charged towards the stone wall. With a rumbling sound, the stone wall with the phoenix pattern on it collapsed, revealing another dark space. When she clearly saw the man standing in the midst of the shattered rocks, Zhu Yao simply felt as though the metal basin that had been floating in the air the entire time had smashed right into her. Holy shit, it's really him. Thunder Attribute Phoenix 7. The man's face flashed with ecstasy. He turned to look at the cave entrance, and was stunned for a moment. Then his face fell. How could it be so old? Who are you? Old. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. She clenched her fists, and wished that she could just step forward and give him a good beating. Grandma, Granny, Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong just happened to follow them in. When they saw Little Eighth inside, they were stunned for a moment, and subconsciously tightened their grip on the sword in their hands. Zhu Yao waved her hands at the two of them, signaling them not to be nervous. He took a step forward and sighed. Little Eight. That's right, this was the youngest phoenix of the Phoenix clan, Little Eight, who had been killed with a handful of melon seeds. Seventh sister? His face was full of disbelief as he stared blankly at her old face, tears welling up in his eyes. It's really you? Zhu Yao could not help but feel a little touched as well. How long had it been? She did not expect that she would be able to see him here. Just as she was about to step forward and give him a loving hug, he suddenly said, "How did you become so ugly?" He knew how to chat. What did he mean by becoming ugly? She simply had a little more life experience. Are you really my seventh sister? Little Eighth circled around her, and said with a worried look. What should we do? You were already extremely ugly without a tail. Now that you've become like this, does this mean that you've become uglier than the Phoenix clan, and are charging towards the human realm? Scram! Zhu Yao raised her leg and kicked him, yet he dodged to the side. In an instant, he had already walked a few steps away with a happy smile on his face. Seventh sister, your personality really hasn't changed in the slightest. You don't even allow people to call you ugly, seriously. May I ask, if I beat this stupid little brother of mine to death, will my cultivation level be deducted? He retracted his smile. He sized her up for a moment, and his eyes dimmed little by little. An unknown emotion surfaced, and only then did he mutter to himself. Seventh sister. Amen. If you say I'm old again, I'll beat you up. However, he suddenly smiled at her with a radiant smile. His eyes curved and he said, That's great. I'm able to see seventh sister one more time. Little Eighth is really happy. Zhu Yao's heart choked. She faintly felt that his expression was a little off. Taking a step forward, she reached out to grab him. Little Eighth, why are you acting so strange? Also, why are you here? However, he suddenly took a step back, dodging her hand. She grumbled, Seventh elder sister, I'm serious. Although you've always bullied me since young, I've really missed you. Little Eighth. She frowned. She didn't know why, but when she heard him speak in such an obedient manner, she began to panic in the depths of her heart. Instead, she panicked and had a bad premonition. What happened? He was stunned for a moment. His expression sank and he said with a forced smile, Seventh sister, I seem to have thrown the face of the Phoenix race. Although he was smiling, his tears suddenly flowed out, and they were falling even more. That once extremely arrogant little Phoenix, who had always despised her, was actually beginning to cry in front of her. His face was filled with a wronged expression. I shouldn't have believed the words of a mortal. That human practitioner lied to me, and made me use my primordial spirit to open up this space, imprisoning me here for eternity. He even wanted to take my inner core. Her heart trembled. Imprisoning. Was he trapped here as well? She suddenly recalled that mystic maniac. Could it be him? Initially, she had thought that he was just a pure lunatic, just like those perverted doctors in many movies, who did not hesitate to kill so many beasties to refine them into chimeras. She never expected that not only did he kill so many demonic beasts, he even laid his hands on a god. Little Eighth, are you all right? She anxiously stepped forward. Little Eighth still dodged. I was actually trapped by a human practitioner. Seventh sister, are you going to laugh at me for not being a good phoenix? Little Eighth. Zhu Yao's heart clenched. She had never seen him with such an expression, and the uneasiness in the depths of her heart grew heavier. Seventh sister is here. No matter what, don't worry, I will definitely save you. She took a step forward, wanting to pull him, but she grabbed empty air. Her hand had actually passed right through his body. Zhu Yao was instantly stunned. This was impossible. She grabbed a few more times, and without any surprise, her hand passed through his body every single time. It's too late. Little Eighth gave a bitter laugh, and his figure began to fade like a shadow. Seventh sister, Little Eighth is too stupid. I'm going to die from my own stupidity. It's been a long, long time. The entire space suddenly shone with a bright red light. Only then did Zhu Yao clearly see the situation in the room. However, she simply felt an explosion next to her ears, and her entire body was instantly nailed to the ground. She stared at the wall in front of her with widened eyes. That was a red phoenix, a phoenix that had completely lost all signs of life. Its gigantic figure covered the entire gigantic mountain, and on its body that resembled a feather made of red flames, there were several dozens of gigantic black nails nailed into the mountain. Around the mountain, there were even countless blood-red formations engraved. Large amounts of fiery red fresh blood endlessly flowed out from the black nails, dripping into the blood pool below. Little Eighth's soft voice sounded next to her ears. To be able to see Seventh sister again after death, Little Eighth is really happy. At the same time, his figure began to fade. Little Eighth. Zhu Yao was a little unable to believe this reality. She tried to pull him several times, yet, her hand passed through his body time and time again. In the end, she could only watch as he disappeared before her eyes. Yet, she was unable to do anything at all. A piercing pain instantly came from the depths of her heart, as though needles were piercing into her heart. She could not help but press down on her chest. Yet, the pain was still making it hard for her to breathe. Yu Yao. Yu Yan's voice sounded next to her ears. What you saw was merely a strand of divine sense he left behind. He has long been. I know. It was because she knew that she felt even more pain. Because she was even late to send him off on his final journey. Initially, she thought it was a reunion, but it was actually a farewell of death. She would definitely not forgive the person who killed him. A red light suddenly shone from within the blood pool, and a human figure slowly floated out from within. It was actually that strange divine art practitioner she saw earlier. However, there was a faint deathly aura surrounding his body. Under the cleansing of the god's blood, the deathly aura gradually dissipated. Under the cleansing of the god's blood, that aura of death was slowly suppressed. In an instant, Zhu Yao realized that this was the human practitioner that Little Eighth was talking about, the one who deceived him. She also understood his intentions. This body was evidently at the end of its lifespan. He killed Little Eighth in order to use the god's blood to extend his life. Zhu Yao suddenly widened her eyes. She clenched her fists tightly, and boundless rage instantly engulfed her entire body. She immediately summoned her sword intent and charged towards the person in the blood pool. However, at the moment of contact, it was blocked by a red formation. On the right side of the blood pool, a figure flashed, and an illusory figure that looked exactly the same as the person in the pool appeared next to her. It's you guys again. The man coldly snorted. You're actually here to court death again. He first glanced at Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong with disdain, and then looked at Zhu Yao a little fearfully. Zhu Yao clenched her fists, and her entire body began to tremble uncontrollably. Gritting her teeth, she asked with emphasis on every word. Little Eighth, you did it? The man was startled for a moment. You recognize this phoenix? Then a hint of joy flashed past his face. Then you must know how to retrieve its inner core, right? Hurry and tell me. As long as I have a god's inner core, I will be able to completely revive. I will no longer have to appear with my divine sense, and I will even be able to ascend to the higher realm. Zhu Yao's eyes were about to turn red from the rage in the depths of her heart. She gritted her teeth and said, I know. Hurry and tell me. He had an anxious look. As long as you tell me, mystic arts, spiritual medicine, mystic treasures, I can give you anything? I can give you anything you want. I want you to pay with your life. She immediately circulated the spiritual energy in her entire body, controlled her sword intent, and once again attacked him. She had never wanted to destroy someone as badly as she did at this moment. The man was startled. With a twist of his hand, a spiritual sword was materialized in an instant, and he attacked Zhu Yao, instantly scattering her sword intent. You're overestimating yourself. He coldly snorted. Suddenly, spiritual energy flowed out from his entire body, and a gigantic black snake floated out from his body. With its mouth wide open, it counterattacked with a threatening aura. This was the opponent's sword intent. Zhu Yao simply felt an irresistible pressure coming straight at her, and she was about to kneel down from the spiritual pressure. However, she gritted her teeth and steadied herself. Her spiritual energy once again condensed into a sword spirit, and she welcomed that snake. Yu Yao. The Pi emitted a white light, and Yu Yan's figure once again appeared. With a wave of his hand, he materialized a wall of wind, blocking the opponent's attack. He then reached out to pull Zhu Yao, wanting to stop her desperate actions. Zhu Yao reached out to grab the Pi in her embrace, and forcefully pinched it. Pi. The Pi opened its mouth in pain. She turned around and threw it towards the two little ones behind her. In the next moment, the Pi grew large, and with a single gulp, it swallowed the two of them. Yu Yao. Only then did Yu Yan realize what she wanted to do. He wanted to stop her, but it was already too late. His figure flashed, and together with the Pi, they were teleported out of this space, disappearing from where they stood. Zhu Yao once again gathered the spiritual energy in her body, condensed it into sword intent, and looked straight at the man in front of her. I will take revenge for little Eighth myself. This was the only person she wanted to personally beat up. Chapter 291. Zhu Yao simply felt a ball of fire burning in the depths of her heart, burning her to the point where she wanted to destroy everything. Even her lightning phoenix, which was originally white, was slowly turning into red lightning. As for that mystic cultivator, he evidently did not place her in his eyes. Although he was a little surprised that the few of them suddenly disappeared, he merely paused for a moment before he began to attack. The pressure of a demigod was instantly released, attempting to suppress Zhu Yao to the ground. However, it was completely useless. Zhu Yao was still standing there. How is this possible? His face was filled with disbelief. A mere Azoth core practitioner was actually able to resist the pressure of a demigod practitioner. The so-called pressure was actually an aura produced by the spiritual energy in a practitioner's body. Hence, the higher one's cultivation, the stronger the pressure. In order to increase a practitioner's cultivation, they needed to absorb spiritual energy. Hence, they instinctively felt fear towards those with denser spiritual energy, and were thus suppressed. Fundamentally speaking, other than the suppression of spiritual energy, it was more of a subconscious fear in the human heart. However, the current Zhu Yao was filled with rage. Other than wanting to beat the person in front of her to death, she basically did not have any other thoughts. What the hell was she afraid of? The lightning phoenix, which had already turned red, let out a long cry, and once again charged towards the other side. The man was startled. He gave up on exerting pressure on the other party, summoned back the black snake formed from his sword intent, and went up as well. The two sword intents clashed, and in an instant, sand and stones flew everywhere. The entire floating mountain began to shake, and rubble fell from above, casting mottled shadows in the sky. The man frowned. He had initially thought that he could easily deal with the other party, but what surprised him was that forget about the other party not being afraid of his pressure. Even the sword intent actually carried such great might. This floating mountain. The interior was hollow in the first place, and under such a huge commotion, there were already signs of it collapsing. A hint of worry flashed across the man's face. His main body was in the blood pool. If this mountain collapsed, it would definitely affect him. He had no choice but to divert his attention to take care of the blood pool beside him. With this distraction, he lost control of his sword intent, and was actually evenly matched with the other party. The phoenix and the snake fought in the sky for a long while, yet they still could not subdue the other party. Every time he swatted away the lightning, it would shatter. In the next moment, it would once again condense into a new form. Although Zhu Yao had already circulated all of her spiritual energy, after all, her cultivation was still 2 large realms lower than her opponent's. Currently, she was barely holding on by relying on the anger in her heart. His spiritual power was almost depleted. It wouldn't be long before she died under his sword intent. Her reason, which had been burned by anger, came back bit by bit. She opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. The red sword intent flashed. There seemed to be signs of collapse. The man sneered as a trace of mockery flashed across his eyes. A mere golden core cultivator dared to challenge him alone. He was really overestimating himself. Zhu Yao's situation was getting more and more difficult. Her spiritual power would be exhausted. Do you regret it? No. She would not regret staying behind alone. Her little eighth, the Phoenix clan's youngest treasure, was in her heart. He was just a child, but he had been imprisoned here for so many years by this pervert. He left so miserably. No matter what, she could not forgive this murderer. If it was in the modern era, she would have called the police and let the law give justice to Xiaoba. However, this was a Xianxia world, where the strong were revered. His opponent was still a demigod sovereign of the lower realm. No one could do anything to him. Then she would do it. If the world could not give justice to Little Eighth, she would. She came too late, and was unable to save Little Eighth. The only thing she could do was to personally punish this murderer. Little Eighth, just watch. 7th elder sister will definitely make this bastard pay the price. Murderer, pay with your life. If her cultivation was insufficient, then she would rise. If her spiritual energy was insufficient, then she would guide in spiritual energy. Zhu Yao's heart sank. As she increased the output of her spiritual energy into her sword intent, she calmed herself and guided spiritual energy into her body. In an instant, the lightning phoenix, which was already surrounded by the black snake, suddenly doubled in size. With a claw, it slammed the black snake onto the ground. The man took a step back and looked at Zhu Yao with a shocked expression. What are you doing? However, he realized that the surrounding spiritual energy was beginning to move, and it was surging towards Zhu Yao. Guide spiritual energy into your body. Are you courting death? The spiritual energy that was directly guided in was extremely messy. If she did not focus on guiding it into her dantian, it would continue to rampage in her meridians. She actually wanted to fight with him while guiding the spiritual energy that was lacking. She was simply courting death. I had thought you were a smart one, but you're actually this stupid. You're actually courting death. The man coldly laughed. With a twist of his hand, his sword intent once again charged towards Zhu Yao. If this continues, you won't be able to live either. Zhu Yao did not reply. She simply controlled her sword intent, and approached him without any regard for her life. The lightning on the lightning phoenix's body struck the surroundings with crackling sounds, and the collapse of the mountain became even more severe. There were even rocks that smashed towards the blood pool, but they were blocked by the formation outside. The man's mind relaxed, and he faintly felt that the lightning phoenix was about to suppress the black snake. A hint of fury flashed past his face, and with a frown he coldly said, If you continue to act recklessly like this, don't even think about leaving this place alive. Don't tell me I want to leave this place alive. Zhu Yao immediately glared back at him. The reason why I'm staying behind is because I never thought that I would be able to stand up again in the first place. My goal is simply to make it so that you will never be able to climb back up again. As the saying goes, the soft fear the hard fear the unreasonable, and the unreasonable fear the reckless. Right now, she was the reckless one. The man was startled, and the expression on his face changed a few times. A moment later, he regained his composure and said with a sunken voice, "So what if you're not afraid of death? Do you think there's any use in temporarily guiding spiritual energy into your body? You basically won't make it in time. If absorbing spiritual energy was really that fast, then there wouldn't be people who couldn't ascend after spending thousands of years. The speed at which you're guiding spiritual energy is basically unable to catch up to your consumption." Before he could even finish, the aura of the entire space instantly changed. As though a spiritual energy storm had suddenly blown, the flourishing spiritual energy in the surroundings suddenly went berserk. As though they were being guided by something, they began to wildly surge towards the opposite side. The various spiritual energy formed a spiritual energy whirlpool, surging into the sky, and instantly crumbled the mountain peak. Before the sunlight could even shine down, the cave entrance on the mountain peak was already occupied by the various spiritual energy currents. The entire floating mountain instantly turned into the shape of an active volcano. Only the volcano was spewing lava outwards, while the spiritual energy at this moment was surging inwards. Spiritual energy rioting. And it was the spiritual energy rioting of all 5 elements. How is this possible? She was merely guiding spiritual energy into her body. How could she attract so much spiritual energy? The man was startled, and the expression on his face changed several times. Suddenly, a kind of feeling arose. She really wanted to kill him. No way. He had schemed for so many years, to defy the heavens and change his fate. He did not hesitate to offend the divine race, and even captured so many demonic beasts. He had conducted experiments for so long, and he was just a step away from success. As long as he obtained the divine race's inner core, he would be able to ascend to the immortal realms. How could he fall short of success at this moment? His heart panicked. His eyes were filled with viciousness. Taking advantage of the fact that the spiritual energy had yet to be completely absorbed, he raised his hand and conjured millions of icicles, which covered the sky and the earth as they attacked. He was, after all, a soul formation cultivator. How could he possibly not be able to defeat an Aurus Core stage disciple? The reason why he did not directly kill him earlier was only because he wanted to obtain the method to extract the inner core. Now it was obvious that he could no longer leave this person alive. The dense icicles flew over. There was simply no way to avoid. She actually could not avoid it. Then, she decided not to avoid it. Zhu Yao immediately cast an art. She slammed her palm into the ground, and in an instant, millions of lightning sparks soared into the sky. Half of the mountain, which had long exploded due to the spiritual energy, instantly collapsed. Little Eight's body, which had been pinned to the mountain, fell onto the ground with a loud bang as well. Zhu Yao's heart ached. However, she immediately turned numb from the wild surging of various spiritual energy attacks. Spiritual energy occupied every inch of the meridians in her body, crazily destroying her body, which had just recovered not too long ago. Every single part of her body was lacerated. Every single part of her body was in so much pain that she wished she was dead. It had been a long time since spiritual energy erupted. Ever since she possessed the all-elemental spirit veins, spiritual energy eruptions had never occurred again when she took in spiritual energy into her body. Back then, she thought that she was only compatible with lightning spiritual energy. Hence, when she took in spiritual energy with her 5 spirit veins, a situation like spiritual energy eruption would not occur. Later on, she slowly realized that her affinity with spiritual energy basically did not differentiate between different types of spiritual energy. However, in the past, when she took in spiritual energy into her body, she would subconsciously pay attention to a certain attribute. She would not take in all 5 types of spiritual energy at the same time. Now that she had let go of her restraints, she did not reject anything that came her way. As expected, the phenomenon of spiritual energy eruptions would still occur. And this phenomenon was exactly what she was looking forward to. The 5 elements countered each other, and the spiritual energy was crazily destroying her body. However, Zhu Yao did not have any spare energy to calm and control the rampaging spiritual energy, and directly used it. The sword intent, which was still glowing red earlier, was already slowly being dyed with the colors of various spiritual energy. In just a few moments, it had expanded by a dozen times. The opponent's black serpent sword intent was no longer able to suppress it. It immediately pressed down with its claws. A long cry resounded. That black serpent disappeared into thin air. Pooh, the man puked out a mouthful of blood. Even a demigod would not be completely unscathed by the power of the sword intent's backlash. His expression instantly turned as dark as the bottom of a pot, as he looked at Zhu Yao, who was already surrounded by rampaging spiritual energy, and had turned into a bloodied person. An Azoth core practitioner. He had cultivated for so many years, yet he was actually defeated in the hands of an Azoth core practitioner. His expression grew even darker, and his eyes grew even more venomous. They were filled with bone-deep hatred. Dodging the lightning bolts that were everywhere, he watched as the lightning phoenix, which had already grown to the size of the dead phoenix on the ground, charged straight towards him with the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. He gritted his teeth, and instantly materialized a myriad of sword formations, blocking in front of him. He couldn't die. How could he die? He was someone who crawled back from the netherworld, so how could he die in the hands of an Azoth core practitioner? Since he had already defied the heavens once, naturally, he could do it a second time as well. A black aura instantly emitted out from the man's body, slowly creeping up to the side of his face, making him look especially sinister. With a wave of his hand he cast an art. The blood in the pool of blood, as though it was being pulled, gathered in his hand, forming a gigantic red blood formation, and flew straight towards the lightning phoenix in the sky. The moment that blood formation came into contact with the sword intent, the lightning phoenix let out a shrill cry. Zhu Yao felt as though her internal organs were burning, as though something was forcefully cutting into her soul. She used all of her willpower to prevent herself from fainting from the pain. Damn it, this old lady here is going to fight you to the death. She immediately accelerated the absorption of spiritual energy, allowing her meridians to shatter into pieces. In any case, she could no longer feel any pain. The sword intent instantly surged. With a long cry, it broke through the blood formation with a single claw. Whistling through the air, it directly pierced through the body of that perverted practitioner. The man simply felt his divine sense being instantly scattered, and the blood at the corner of his mouth sprayed out onto the ground as though it was free. His face was filled with disbelief. An Azoth core actually no. He suddenly widened his eyes, and with a face filled with shock he looked at Zhu Yao, who no longer looked like a human anymore. Nascent soul. Early stage nascent soul. Early stage nascent soul. Demigod. Her cultivation was still surging. A hint of panic flashed past his eyes, as he flew towards the mountaintop to escape. That old lady wouldn't be able to hold on for long with such a wild surge of spiritual energy. As long as he continued to drag things out, she would be seeking her own death. As long as he temporarily left this place, as long as he flew out of this mountain pass. Suddenly, his legs tightened. A lightning chain wrapped around his leg, and with a fierce tug, his entire body was instantly pulled back. With a loud bang, he smashed onto the ground. At the side, there was a gigantic phoenix head, and its fiery red eyes were staring right at him. He didn't know if it was a psychological effect, but he could actually see that those eyes were filled with bone-deep hatred, as though they were going to devour him in the next moment. He was so frightened that he immediately crawled a few steps back. Where was the arrogance he had earlier? And it was now filled with the fear of death. The lightning phoenix in the sky cried out, and a purple lightning bolt instantly struck down, splitting open his flesh. He simply felt his dantian scattering, and he could no longer gather spiritual energy. Don't kill me. The sword intent once again pounced towards him. However, the moment it came into contact with him, it disappeared into the air. Zhu Yao could no longer hold on, and her legs softened as she fell onto the ground. The chaotic spiritual energy earlier had instantly dissipated into the air as well. The place instantly quietened down. The man was startled for a moment, and then, as though he had suddenly understood something, he began to laugh out wildly. Ha 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 ha. This is the will of the heavens. Even the god race was about to fall in my hands, so what if you're strong? In the end you still can't defeat me. His dantian had already been destroyed, and he could no longer use spiritual energy. Thus, he could only pick up the flying sword that had fallen beside him, and dragging his body that was not much better than Zhu Yao's, he limped over. His smile was extremely arrogant. Didn't you want to avenge that stupid phoenix? I do want to see just who it is. Pwah. Before he could even finish, several blood-colored icicles instantly pierced out from his body, instantly piercing through his body. His eyes were wide open, as though he was completely unable to understand what had just happened. Carrying a heart filled with unwillingness and hatred, he completely lost all signs of life. Zhu Yao released the final mystic art in her hands. A water-type mystic art. Back then, she had taught Little Radish a life-saving mystic art, but she never expected that it would be used here. She had won the gamble. She had avenged Little Eighth, and returned him justice. Zhu Yao heaved a sigh of relief. Her entire body no longer had the slightest bit of strength, and even her consciousness was beginning to float a little. She was going to log off, right? Suddenly the ground shook. As though the blood pool was boiling, blood-red bubbles began to emerge. And the man who had already turned into a blood porcupine in front of her eyes earlier, instantly disappeared into the air. In the next moment, that perverted divine art once again slowly rose from the blood pool. A sinister and evil laughter instantly resounded throughout the entire bottom of the mountain. Ho ho ho! Do you really think you can kill me like this? Two words surfaced in the depths of Zhu Yao's heart. Chapter 292. Currently, Zhu Yao did not even have the strength to move her fingers. Scarlet blood flowed into her eyes, causing the entire world to seem to have turned scarlet red. However, that pervert, who should have died long ago, rose up from the blood pool unscathed. Arrogant and eerie laughter came from the front. Zhu Yao gritted her teeth in hatred. Was this person's zodiac a cockroach? The blood of the god race really has the ability to go against the heavens. As long as this blood pool exists, I can revive infinitely. His face was full of malevolence and madness. So what if it's the heavenly Tao? I'm going to defy the heavens. 1,000,000 years ago, Wang Shang couldn't kill me, and neither can you. So what if I can't ascend? I will still enjoy the Tao of longevity. I, Cheng Qingdiao, am destined to stand above the heavenly Tao. Cheng Qingdiao. Damn, so it's this bitch. He didn't die. Taoist Wang Shang, you're too unprofessional. Or could it be that he already knew that he would be killed by Wang Shang, so he arranged all of this, using Little Eight to revive infinitely? No wonder Taoist Wang Shang wanted him to go down in history after he ascended. He was indeed a bitch among bitches. Pervert Cheng had completely floated up from the blood pool. His laughter became increasingly shrill and sinister, and a large amount of black aura started to appear around his body. The twisted and hideous black mark started to spread from his bone-like palm, crawling all over his body. This was a devilish seal. He was possessed. That's right, for this kind of deranged person. The demon race is the most suitable identity for him. Unfortunately, she no longer had the ability to stop him. The demonic energy on his body grew stronger and stronger, and his cultivation soared. When the demonic mark had already spread to his face, he had completely turned into a demon. He seemed to have sensed the sudden surge of energy in his body. With a sinister smile, he raised one of his hands towards Zhu Yao on the ground, and a black gas began to gather in the center of his palm. You have indeed surprised me, but unfortunately, you met me. He's destined to die here. His palm flashed, and the condensed devil chi was about to take her life. Zhu Yao could not avoid it. Back then, he was only a demigod. Yet she had already turned him into such a ghastly state, let alone now that he was already a devil. She closed her eyes, resigned to her fate. At most, he would just change to another avatar. When she came back, it was another tough woman. What's going on? How was this possible? Ah. Cheng Qingdiao suddenly let out a shrill scream as the situation took a turn for the worse. Zhu Yao could not help but open her eyes to look, only to see the entire blood pool suddenly beginning to burn with purple flames. As if it had a mind of its own. He pounced on pervert Cheng. It instantly turned him into a flaming man. He was frantically trying to extinguish the fire on his body, but he couldn't stop the rising fire at all. It was as if the fire was growing on his body. The flames grew stronger and stronger, and even the devil chi on his body was burned away. No, what's going on? He screamed and slapped, and started to run in all directions. However, the more he moved, the more intense the fire became, and the faster it spread. All the places that had a drop of little eight's blood turned into that kind of fire. In an instant, Cheng Qingdiao had already been burnt beyond recognition. He wanted to flee. At this moment, the fire in the blood pool grew even more intense, igniting into a sky-high inferno. As if it wanted to stop him from escaping, the flames instantly wrapped around pervert Cheng, who was about to fly away, and dragged him back. He once again fell into the blood pool. However, it was already a sea of flames. In the blink of an eye, he was engulfed by the flames, and his figure disappeared. The entire mountain resounded with his screams. No. This is impossible. I'm undying. I'm undying. He kept on shouting this, yet his voice grew hoarser and hoarser, before finally disappearing. The flames were instantly extinguished as well. This unforeseen event happened too suddenly. In just a short 15 minutes, pervert Cheng had already turned into ashes. For a moment, Zhu Yao did not know if she should laugh or cry. This damned pervert. He could have turned into anything, but he just had to turn into a devil. Gods and devils were mutually exclusive, and they would not rest until one of them was dead. This was something brought about by the bloodline of every god. The god's blood was supposed to be a sacred medicine that could revive him. However, the moment he turned into a devil, the god's blood would naturally burn him cleanly. How ironic! It was no wonder that even though he had turned into such a pervert, his face still did not have the mark of a bug. He basically did not even have the qualifications to be a bug. From the moment he decided to act against Little Eighth, this ending was already destined. Could this be considered as his retribution? Could this be considered as the heavenly Tao returning justice to Little Eighth? Pervert Cheng was dead, and he died due to his own greed. It was time for her to log off as well. Just as Zhu Yao was about to allow herself to fall into a deep slumber, an anomaly occurred once again. It did not even have the time to pant. Following pervert Cheng's death, all of the formations he placed down instantly collapsed, while Little Eight's corpse on the ground suddenly burst into flames. The golden-colored flames instantly illuminated the entire mountain. This was the flames of Nirvana. The flames grew even stronger, and suddenly, they formed into the shape of a phoenix, soaring into the sky. A long cry resounded through the clouds, before finally disappearing into the horizon. The flames on the ground grew smaller, and a tiny figure could be faintly seen. Nirvana rebirth. Zhu Yao fiercely widened her eyes, as she felt her heart clenching. How could she have forgotten that phoenixes were undying birds? Even if they died, they could still be reborn from the flames. However, that would no longer be Little Eighth. In the next moment, the entire mountain began to shake. Gigantic mountain rocks began to fall, and this place was about to completely collapse. No, not only this place, the entire space was collapsing. She could sense that cracks had even appeared in the sky. This space was created by Little Eighth, and the moment he underwent nirvana, naturally, this place would not be able to be maintained. When that time came, everything in this space would be torn apart. But what about that phoenix that was reborn? That was merely a fledgling. It was basically unable to escape, and would perish along with this space. Although that was no longer Little Eighth, she could not bear to let it die here either. Zhu Yao's heart instantly burned with anxiety. Yet, she only had a single breath left, let alone saving someone. Calm down. There must be a way. There must be. Realm Spirit, where the hell did you go at a time like this? Ting. A conversation window popped out, and she was instantly overjoyed. When she saw the words on it, her expression instantly turned cold. Congratulations on obtaining the achievement of spoiling 8 avatars. You will be rewarded with a chance to reincarnate. Please choose A. Immediately log off. Guide 9. 0B. Die completely and log off. Let me suffer for a while longer. Log off my ass. Was there even the slightest difference between dying now and dying later? No, she still could not die. If she died, the little phoenix that underwent nirvana would definitely die as well. Zhu Yao took a deep breath, desperately maintaining her consciousness, and inspected her own body. She realized that the inside of her body had already been destroyed to the point that she could not even recognize it. In more professional terms, the degree of damage sustained was as high as 99%. Just a little more and she would have died. Other than the area around her shattered Azoth core, which was considered stable, the rest of her body was still in chaos. But why was there nothing wrong there? After carefully inspecting it, she realized that the inside was maintained by that strand of transparent spiritual energy. Was it because she had it? She suddenly recalled the first time the spiritual energy surged. And it was this strand of strange spiritual energy that calmed it down. For a moment, she did not have the time to think of the reason. This spiritual energy was actually able to calm down the chaos. Then she would directly bring it out. She guided the transparent spiritual energy into the other spiritual energy gathering areas that were evidently high from playing. As expected, the moment the spiritual energy came out, the chaotic spiritual energy in the surrounding areas automatically stopped. As though they had been called, they actually began to be separated according to their attributes. They began to enter her dantian in an orderly manner. Her dantian had long been shattered into pieces. Even if these gentle spiritual energy were to enter, the moment they entered, they would immediately dissipate. And the transparent spiritual energy was simply too limited. Even if she could calm down the spiritual energy, to her body which was already in a mess, it was merely a drop in the ocean. And this space was about to collapse soon. Even if she could hold on, she basically did not have the time. Zhu Yao's heart grew anxious, and the spiritual energy which had calmed down instantly lost its sense of propriety. The 5 elemental spiritual energy which she had separated with great difficulty, once again fused together. The hell? She waited for another wave of spiritual energy to erupt. However, she realized that the 5 elemental spiritual energy which had once again fused together, suddenly turned white, and entered her shattered dantian. And it did not seem to have any intention of dissipating at all. This is Zhu Yao simply felt a ding sound in her mind. She instantly found the answer to the matter which she could not understand all this while. The fusion of the 5 elemental spiritual energy could actually produce a new breed. That transparent spiritual energy was, she immediately added the 3 mutated spiritual energy of wind, lightning, and ice into the 5 elemental spiritual energy which had already been separated. 8 types of spiritual energy fused together. Transparent. The fusion of 8 types of spiritual energy was actually that transparent spiritual energy. Zhu Yao instantly felt as though she had opened the door to a whole new world. This discovery was not inferior to Yuan Longping's discovery of hybrid rice. Zhu Yao immediately called out the newly formed transparent spiritual energy. As expected, it fused together with the small amount of spiritual energy from before. The team leader instantly grew stronger, and the amount of spiritual energy that was separated increased as well. Zhu Yao immediately followed the same method and fused even more transparent spiritual energy. In just a moment, the rebellion in her body had already stopped. Basically, there was no need to guide it at all. The transparent spiritual energy began to automatically restore the meridians in her body. Forget about her dantian. Even her damaged divine sense was being restored as well. The effects of her shattered dantian had already completely disappeared. Because she had directly skipped over the nascent soul stage. She had even removed the effects of nascent soul. She only had to restore her divine sense. Adding that the spiritual energy rebellion earlier, there was a lot of spiritual energy being brought in the first place. She basically did not have to worry about spiritual energy. In merely 15 minutes, she had actually climbed back from the brink of death. Ting. The conversation window which had been floating in front of her shook. The words on it flashed and a new one appeared. Detected that target's avatar has activated its second spring. The resurrection quota has lost its effect. I might as well throw it away. Zhu Yao. That the hell was this second spring? Who cares about your reincarnation quota? Without the quota, wouldn't she still have to change avatars? The conversation window shook, however, It did not disappear like before. Instead, it turned into a ray of white light and flew into the nirvanic flames behind. In an instant, the flames were extinguished, and the gigantic phoenix turned into a pile of black ashes. And in the middle of the black ashes, a little red bird with a body of black ashes crawled out. Chick! It suddenly called out. Zhu Yao's heart turned sour. Enduring the pain in her body that had yet to completely recover, she walked over with a bloody face. However, she saw that little fellow flapped its little wings in disgust, and suddenly spoke out with an extremely tender voice. Why did you turn into such an ugly appearance? You're even uglier than my 7th elder sister. Zhu Yao stopped in her tracks. She fiercely widened her eyes, and looked at that fluffy little bird. Little 8th. How was this possible? The little bird turned to look at her, and seemed to be stunned for a moment. Then it said with a stern look, Who are you? I'm telling you, my 7th elder sister is much uglier than you. You won't be able to scare me by pretending to be a ghost. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. She could not help but raise her hand and slap towards its bird head. I'm the ugly one. In your entire family, you're the only ugly one. The little bird looked shocked. 7th elder sister, it's you. How did you? Stop. She pinched its beak. If you say the word ugly again, I'm going to put righteousness before family. Carrying it up, she sized it up for a moment. Realizing that it did not lack any claws or feathers, the pent-up anger in Zhu Yao's heart was instantly released. She gave it a tight bear hug, and her voice uncontrollably began to choke. Little 8th. You're finally back. Welcome back. It's good that you're back. The little bird stiffened for a moment. A moment later, it flapped its wings and shrunk even deeper into her embrace. Clearly, its little body was trembling, yet it was still stubborn like a dead duck. 7th elder sister, why are you hugging me so tightly? Ugliness is contagious. Damned Sundara. I'll forgive you today. I'm serious. The reason why I'm so ugly right now is most likely contagious. A moment later, 7th elder sister. Amen. Thank you for finding me. 7th elder sister. Amen. I will try my best not to find you ugly. What should she do if she still wanted to beat it up? The space finally collapsed. Though the one who split open the space back then was little 8th, he had already undergone rebirth, and was no longer that phoenix from before. His godly energy had naturally been rewound to 0 as well, and he was basically unable to support this space. Though the phoenix race could not die, they would lose all of their memories during rebirth, forgetting everything from their past lives. After their rebirth, everything would no longer be the same as before. However, little 8th had undergone rebirth with a complete set of memories. Regarding this, Zhu Yao guessed that it was probably because of the rebirth quota that Realm Spirit threw away. She rushed to tear open the void at the very last moment, and brought little 8th, who was still a weak chicken, back to the cultivation world. At the moment before she left, she could not help but turn around to look at those demonic beasts that pervert Chung had assembled. However, she realized that all of the demonic beasts were instantly ignited with the same golden flames that little 8th had when he was reborn. The entire place was filled with fiery light, and those extremely violent chimeras that had completely lost their rationality were all turned into ashes. They were puppets that pervert Chung had created using his god's blood in the first place. Now that little 8th's original body had undergone rebirth, they would naturally disappear as well. She could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Perhaps, to those beasties, this was a form of release as well. They were forcefully pieced together to be born, and although they could move about freely, they did not have the souls that living beings should have. The only thing they possessed was a hint of resentment left behind by demonic beasts before their deaths. Actually, they basically could not be considered alive. Chapter 293. Not only did the team retreat unscathed, she also obtained its Sundara little phoenix. She had to admit that it was a proper D. If not for the fact that he had to face a certain master, who seemed to want to freeze the entire Nest Chazarei sect. Zhu Yao had never seen her master angered to such an extent. She could even faintly see the sparks of lightning in his eyes. If not for the fact that she had a high level of awareness, had a good attitude when admitting her mistakes, and had sworn to never do it again. It was truly possible for him to flatten the entire Nescaezerei sect out of anger. Who asked you to lead my disciple astray? Of course he could avoid death, but he couldn't escape punishment. In order to teach his stupid disciple a lesson, a certain master expressed that punishment was necessary. Towards this, Zhu Yao silently admitted her fear, and weakly raised a request. Don't hit my face, okay? Since Yu Yan agreed to it, he really did not slap her face, and instead, turned to attack her buttocks. To think that she, the grand ancestral martial aunt of Nescaezerei sect, possessed such a cool identity. The main point was that she was already so old. Yet, she was being pressed onto her own master's thigh, and like a child, she was being spanked on her bottom. Even if he didn't slap his face, he would still be utterly humiliated. He even sealed her spiritual power, and didn't show the slightest bit of mercy, hitting her loud and clear. Fortunately, there weren't many people from his skybound peak. Otherwise, she would really want to die. Little eighth, that person with no sense of loyalty. After realizing that her master looked exactly the same as the far ancient high god, she actually resolutely stood on her master's side. When she was suffering such an inhumane punishment, she silently turned her head away. Traitor! Unsurprisingly, she couldn't get up the next day. No one could understand the sorrow of an old man being spanked. Are you awake? Yu Yan pushed open the door and entered. Glancing at his disciple who was still lying on the bed, though his expression was still as cold as before, it lacked the fury from yesterday. It seemed like his anger had dissipated quite a bit. Master! Zhu Yao immediately climbed up, and looked at him with teary eyes. Her face was filled with grievance. Master, you're actually using domestic violence against me. It hurts. Yu Yan's footsteps paused for a moment. Looking at his disciple's aggrieved expression, the anger in his heart instantly disappeared completely. Finally he sighed. Walking to the bed, he reached out and picked up his stupid disciple. A white light flashed between his hands. He slowly caressed a certain part of her wound and said while treating her, "Next time, will you still act on your own?" When he thought of that critical situation, however, she had forced him out of the mystic realm and faced him alone. He wanted to beat her up again. There won't be a next time. Zhu Yao immediately raised her watch to show her loyalty. I promise. It was enough for her to do such a stupid thing once. How could there be a next time? Now that he thought about it, his master was clearly there. She could have easily crushed the boss, but she insisted on staying behind alone to court death. His IQ must have gone offline without explanation. Yu Yao, remember this. Yu Yan hugged her tightly, lowering his head to touch her forehead. He suddenly looked straight into her eyes. No matter how big the matter is, you still have me. Don't bear it alone. Zhu Yao was startled for a moment, and suddenly, something warm floated up from the depths of her heart. Hugging him back, she nodded heavily. Yes. Only then was Yu Yan satisfied, as he pointed at the center of her forehead. Zhu Yao simply felt an aura entering her divine sense. At the same time that it released the seal on her spiritual energy, it even circulated the spiritual energy in her body, modifying and adjusting the state of her body. Master, don't move, I will help you reconstruct your body. As expected, in the next moment, she clearly felt a change in her figure. Her waist was no longer sore. Her legs were no longer bent. Her skin was more elastic. The wrinkles on her face had disappeared as well, and even her hair was darker and brighter than before. In less than a quarter of an hour, the 50-year-old old lady had instantly turned into an 18-year-old young lady. Zhu Yao happily summoned a water mirror to take a look. Correction. She had turned into a 28-year-old young lady. The hell? Wasn't this how she looked like in the modern era? Reconstructing her body like this was a little lacking in skill, wasn't it? Master, tell me honestly, do you dislike my old appearance? Hurry and say you love me, and compensate for my wounded heart. Yu Yan was startled for a moment, and then he seriously replied. Yes. Zhu Yao was dumbfounded. This wasn't right. Shouldn't you take this chance to confess, and tell me how deep your love is? Shouldn't the moon represent your heart? Yes, he actually replied yes. It wasn't easy for me to be prideful. Can't you be a little more cooperative? Zhu Yao simply felt as though a pure young lady's heart had been smashed into smithereens. Master, you're heartless, you're unrighteous, you're unreasonable. Looking at his disciple who had suddenly turned gloomy, Yu Yan was a little confused. He simply wasn't used to remembering another face. Why did his disciple look so sad? Why don't he try his best to remember it? If you really like how you looked earlier, then let your master help you change back? You're already disgusted, so who wants to change back? I'm going to break up with you. Nonsense. Yu Yan frowned. Although he did not know what breaking up meant, he instinctively disliked it. He consoled. Ha, why don't your master accompany you? What did he mean? In the next moment, his figure began to change. His height became shorter, his skin loosened, and his hair turned white. From a handsome young man, he turned into a handsome old man. Zhu Yao. Were they going to grow old together? She had to admit, some people were born with a good foundation, and even when they grew old, they would still look the same. Why did she feel as though she had lost to the point where even her underwear was not left? She felt even more unhappy. What should she do? Seventh elder sister. A fluffy red little bird crawled in from outside the door. Its two chick-like wings were currently hugging onto a green bean that was about the same size as itself. As it moved its little claws, it raised its voice. Can't you make this bean smaller for me? I can't chew. Before it could even finish, it saw the two unfamiliar people by the bed. It was startled for a moment. Who are you two? Regarding the unique, transparent spiritual energy in her body, Yu Yan had helped his disciple investigate it. The conclusion he obtained was that this was most likely the legendary primal chaos spiritual energy. It possessed spiritual energy of all attributes at the same time. In other words, no matter what type of mystic arts it was, there was no need to convert them, and they could directly use the primal chaos spiritual energy. And because her body was filled with this type of spiritual energy, she no longer had to use a single type of energy when she cast mystic arts in the past. Just based on the casting speed alone, theoretically speaking, she had increased it by 2 times. As for the other functions, they had yet to be developed. But in summary, it was pretty amazing. Otherwise, she wouldn't have directly charged into the demigod stage. Regarding the matter of her becoming a demigod, Zhu Yao did not report it to the sect. Although she had been in closed-door training for 5 years, she had directly advanced from foundation to demigod in 5 years. This was a godly speed that moved the cultivation world. It was too frightening. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, the omnipotent master, Yu Yan, had helped his disciple conceal her cultivation level. Unless her cultivation level was higher than Yu Yan's, in the eyes of others, she was only an early-stage Azoth core. But even so, successfully forming her Azoth core in 5 years had stunned Neschazarei Academy's headmaster, Chu Jiang. When he received the news, he smiled as if he was flushed with success. He even excitedly bowed towards the heavens, thanking the heavens, thanking Mingyu for letting Senior Martial Ant meet Skybound Peak. Senior Martial Ant has formed her Azoth core, and the treasures of Skybound Peak have been secured. Her life as a deity is simply amazing. Initially, she had wanted to personally congratulate her. However, because Zhu Yao was being educated by her own master in the past few days, she had been staying in Skybound Peak without coming out. Headmaster Chu Jiang had no choice but to settle for the next best thing. Representing all the teachers in Neschazarei sect, he sent a congratulatory message. Senior Martial Ant, I heard you formed your Azoth core. Come out and treat us. It's fine, I'll pay. Furthermore, he had cautiously sent Little Tyrant and Yi Qingsong, these 2 friends who had a rather good relationship with her, to invite her several times. After all, she still had to stay in Neschazarei sect, so Zhu Yao felt that she should give Chu Jiang a little face. Of course, Master. When are you going to end your lessons? Ever since she failed to court death the last time, her concise master seemed to have activated some sort of incredible attribute. Every day, he would give her various ideological education lessons, attempting to pull her back from the death-seeking path. She suddenly regretted returning to Skybound Peak a little. Because of the formation at the entrance, no one could enter to interrupt them. She had no choice but to continue listening every day. At this point, she had no choice but to criticize student Wang Shang. What happened to the heaven-defying formation that only she could enter? Why was her master able to easily dispel the formation? And why did even little Eighth know the method to dispel it? Why did her master, after dispelling the formation, set up a formation that not only could one not enter, one could not even leave? Student Wang Shang, you've really disappointed me. As for little Eighth, he had recently become infatuated with Bai Yuan, that pea. Probably due to the nature of a bird, Bai Yuan, who had transformed into a pea, was firmly believed by little Eighth to be edible. Every day he would ponder about how to eat it. Zhu Yao could not even stop him. Without any mercy, he hugged the pea and began to chew on it. As expected, even after reincarnating, this guy was still a glutton. Yu Yan educated her for exactly 5 days. After Zhu Yao repeatedly guaranteed that she would definitely bring him along if she were to court death in the future, he reluctantly accepted it and let her go. The moment she was released from prison, Apui, the moment she left Skybound Peak, Zhu Yao felt as though she had once again seen the light of day. "Ha! Granny, what happened? Why are you so sad?" Little Tyrant asked curiously. Zhu Yao heavily patted on his shoulders. "Ha, this is the worry of a married person. You won't understand. Single dog Little Bai. Why did he feel like he was being looked down upon? My ancestral grandaunt." Yi Qingsong had initially wanted to call her Granny, but looking at her new appearance, he changed his address at the last moment. "Your injuries? I've long recovered." Zhu Yao waved her hands. The two little ones heaved sighs of relief, and only then did they respectfully explain the reason for their visit. "Ancestral grandaunt, please head to the main hall of the main mountain." Got it. Wasn't it just a celebratory feast to secretly feel good? She understood. However, why did the two of you come up together? She could understand why Little Tyrant came up to invite her. However, Yi Qingsong was an outer sect disciple, so he shouldn't be invited for something like this. Master and sect master summoned the two of us here. Yi Qingsong replied. Zhu Yao fiercely widened her eyes. You have a master? This didn't make sense. Didn't he only become the disciple of a demigod sovereign during the tournament 5 years later? He was startled for a moment, but he still honestly replied. Ancestral grandaunt, Qingsong had already entered the sect 5 years ago. 5 years ago? Then wasn't that when he had just entered the sect? Your master is? Talisman Spiritual Mountain Choo Choo. Why was it that big brother? Wasn't he old and eccentric? When did he change his eccentricities? In other words, he had always been an inner sect disciple? The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. Was it really all right for them to not act according to the script? Ancestral grand aunt. Never mind, let's go. If the plot was crooked, so be it. Zhu Yao sighed and walked towards the formation leading down the mountain. Regarding the matter regarding that dimensional space, she did not explain too much to the two little ones, adding that it was a little chaotic back then. They did not know that little Eighth was a god, nor did they see her master. They simply thought that she had mistakenly entered a secret realm, and then escaped. Instead, when she returned that day covered in blood, she gave them quite a fright. The two of them led Zhu Yao to the main hall. Initially, they thought that student Chu Jiang was simply here to celebrate her forming his Azoth core, but they never expected that he was just here to show off. The nascent soul leaders of the various sects and clans were actually gathered in the main hall. The moment she entered, several dozens of nascent soul experts swept their gazes towards her. She had almost unleashed her demigod pressure out of reflex, but fortunately, she managed to endure it in time. However, the feeling of being locked onto by several dozens of divine senses was really not a pleasant experience. Junior Martial Sister Zhu is here. The moment Sovereign Wu Fu, one of the two demigod sovereigns of Nes Chazerei sect, spoke up, in an instant, the divine senses probing her body were retracted one after another. Zhu Yao immediately strode in and greeted the two people seated at the top. Senior Martial Brother Wu Fu, Senior Martial Brother Wu Hua. Seeing the two of them nodding in response, Zhu Yao did not care about the others either, as she turned around and sat down next to Chu Jiang. Her impolite actions had evidently attracted the dissatisfaction of the other nascent soul practitioners, as their eyes carried a hint of dissatisfaction. Though Chu Jiang was nodding his head in satisfaction, and he was just short of shouting out, "Little martial ant, well done." Though her cultivation was only at the Azoth core level, her identity was different. If she were to take the initiative to greet the nascent soul practitioners of the various sects, she would instead lose face. At a time like this, she should put up a front. Initially, he was still worried, and wanted to remind her in private. He never expected that little martial ant would be so insightful, and had long seen through it. A sense of pride instantly rose in the depths of his heart. Our little martial ant is just that domineering, cool, and awesome. However, in order to save trouble, Zhu Yao, who had unintentionally hit the bull's eye, continued to sit there expressionlessly. Acting cold and aloof was her specialty in the inheritance of her sect. Everyone. Clan leader Chu Jiang stood up and spoke on behalf of the officials. "Thank you everyone for coming from so far away to congratulate my sect's little martial ant for forming her Azoth core. My Neschazarei sect has always been on the same side as the other sects, and we have pursued the great Tao of immortality together. It has been millions of years since the old ancestor has blessed us, allowing Skybound Peak to remain in this world, benefiting everyone in our sect. Now that little martial ant is in charge of Skybound Peak, and has successfully formed her Azoth core, it is truly our sect's fortune." When his words fell, he swept a glance at the crowd with a suggestive tone. In an instant, the people who were still dissatisfied with Zhu Yao earlier, kept away the dissatisfaction in their hearts, and their faces turned a little pale. How could they have forgotten? Though this little lady was merely an Azoth core practitioner, she was the successor of Skybound Peak, and could not be easily offended. Who knew what sort of heaven-defying items Neschazarei sect's old ancestor had left behind? Chapter 294. Zhu Yao continued to pretend to be cold and aloof. In any case, her role was to be the sect's mascot. Even if there were people who wanted to step forward and say a few courteous words to her, they would be subtly blocked by Chu Jiang, this good nanny. He acted as if his little martial uncle was sacred and inviolable, and he didn't care about mortals like you. Zhu Yao simply maintained a cold expression throughout the entire process, as she watched everyone play around with each other. In his heart, he was silently thinking about when this sect mascot exhibition would end. Lung Wuqing felt a sorrowful gaze from the other side sweeping over. "Big brother?" Zhu Yao frowned. "This old lady has yet to settle the debt with you regarding Yi Qingsong. What's with that accusing look of yours?" He immediately sent a voice transmission over. "What are you doing? It's very creepy, okay?" Chu Chu was stunned for a moment. A moment later, he sent a voice transmission back. "Sister-in-law, how did you become like this?" "What have I become? Where's your sexy hunchback and sexy wrinkles? In the past, you were so fresh and refined, and I yearned for you in my dreams. How did you become like this after you formed your gold core?" Zhu Yao's expression darkened. "Scram. Weirdo, please leave my world." "Seh." He looked sad as if his fantasy had been shattered. "I can't even call you sister-in-law." "Who's your sister-in-law?" Zhu Yao ruthlessly glared at him. She could not be bothered with this person whose aesthetic sense needed to be reborn, and changed the topic. "Tell me honestly, why did you take Yi Qingsong as your disciple?" "Song?" A trace of confusion flashed across his face as he asked. "Didn't you tell me to do so?" "When did I ask you to accept him as your disciple?" 5 years ago," he said plausibly. "Didn't you tell me to take care of him before you went into seclusion?" She really did say that. But at that time, in order to prevent him from being bullied too badly in the outer sect, she turned evil. "I didn't ask you to accept him as a disciple. Isn't your care a little too thorough?" She had smashed her own foot with a rock. She raised her head and looked behind him. Yi Qingsong was standing at the back, talking to a girl in a pink dress. The girl smiled from time to time as they talked about some happy topic. Yi Qingsong, on the other hand, had a serious expression on his face. As if sensing her gaze, Yi Qing-song looked up, smiled at her, and nodded in greeting. Zhu Yao reflexively replied with a smile. However, he received a probing gaze from the girl in pink. This girl. Zhu Yao frowned. He instantly recalled who she was, and immediately turned to look at little tyrant behind Chu Jiang. As expected, he was currently staring straight at the girl. His brows were tightly knitted, and there was a hint of melancholy in his expression. Damn, so the girl was the female lead Chu Yi. Why did it feel like a melodramatic love triangle was about to play out? Did the little tyrant pick up the male supporting roles script? Zhu Yao went into closed-door training for 5 years. As for the topic of the successor of Skybound Peak, it had been circulating for an entire 5 years. There were countless people from various sects who coveted the treasures inside. However, the so-called successor of Nes Chazarei sect had yet to make an appearance. In an instant, rumors began to spread, and there were even people who suspected that there was basically no such thing as a successor of Skybound Peak, as well as rumors of the treasures being monopolized by Nes Chazarei sect. This time, Chu Jiang pulled Zhu Yao out to bask in the sun. Actually, it was to shut everyone's mouths. Previously, he was afraid that her foundation cultivation was too low, and it would be unsafe. However, she had unexpectedly comprehended her Azoth core. Adding the bottle of nascent soul pellets earlier, he was completely confident that he could help little martial ant form her nascent soul. So naturally, he no longer had any qualms. Let's see who still dares to say that Skybound Peak did not belong to his Nes Chazarei sect. Chu Jiang's face was filled with a bright smile, and he was cheerful the entire time. The only thing lacking was the word show-off written on his face, as he passionately chatted with the various sects and clans. Our Nes Chazarei sect's luck is just that good. If you have the guts, come beat me up. The hearts of the various sects and clans were filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred. Yet, they had no choice but to congratulate him nicely. This kind of one-sided face-slapping, harmonious scene was broken when a Soul Guidance Hall disciple rushed in with a hurried expression. Sect Master. A disciple sprinted over with a pale expression. Before he could even stand properly, he had already knelt onto the ground. Why are you so flustered? Chu Jiang, who had already turned into a maniacal uncle, frowned in dissatisfaction. He was not done being cocky yet. Soul lamp. The disciple's expression turned even paler. Reverend Chu Jing's soul lamp extinguished. Chu Jiang was startled. A hint of astonishment flashed across his face. He immediately turned to look at Bai Ziyuan behind him. Little Tyrant's expression instantly turned as pale as snow. Master. Turning around, he charged out. The entire place instantly quietened down. A soul lamp was a lamp that every disciple of the sect would use their blood essence to light up after they entered the sect. As long as one's life was not extinguished, the soul lamp would not be extinguished. If it were to be extinguished, it would mean that the owner of the lamp had already passed away. And Reverend Chu Jing was precisely Little Tyrant's master, who had been in closed-door training for many years. I never expected that senior martial brother Chu Jing had yet to break through to the demigod stage. Chu Jiang shook his head with a complicated expression, as a hint of melancholy rose in his heart. Though, the rest of the people present began to rejoice in his misfortune. With one less nascent soul reverend, Nes Chazarei sect's strength would naturally decrease. And this was something they were happy to see. Unfortunately, their happiness did not last for long, as Chu Jiang's tone changed. It is indeed unfortunate for our sect to lose a nascent soul practitioner, so I will not keep you reverends any longer. In a few days, during the nascent soul formation ceremony for the other 5 junior martial brothers of my sect, I hope that everyone will do me the honor of attending. 5. Everyone present was stunned. Forming a nascent soul was not easy in the first place, so why was Chu Jiang so certain that there would be 5 of them forming their Azoth cores at the same time? Could it be that there were nascent soul pellets? Everyone exchanged glances, and in an instant, they were able to guess the meaning behind Chu Jiang's words from the other party's eyes. Their expressions, which were still rejoicing in their misfortune earlier, instantly turned ugly. One nascent soul practitioner had finally left, and now there were 5 more. Was he kidding them? The heavens were treating Nest Chazarei sect a little too well, right? Zhu Yao did not mind the open and veiled strife between them, though she was faintly worried about little tyrant who had just charged out. Before he could even figure out the matter of his heartbreak, his master had already disappeared. His luck was a little too bad. Who knew how sad he would be right now? The more she thought about it, the more worried she became. After the crowd dispersed, she bid farewell to Chu Jiang. She did not return to Skybound Peak. Instead, she released her divine sense and searched around Nest Chazarei sect. Only then did she discover little tyrant's figure at the entrance of a cave residence in Talisman's spiritual mountain. Zhu Yao immediately rushed over on her sword, only to see little tyrant standing blankly at the entrance. He was not moving at all, as though he had turned silly. His eyes were empty and blank. Little tyrant. Little Bai. Zhu Yao changed her form of address and called out to him. However, he did not react. Zhu Yao sighed. She had no choice but to take a step forward and turn him around. Grandma. As though he had only just seen her, he muttered. It was hard to tell if the expression on his face was sad or sad. He was still at a loss. She could not help but reach out her hand to stroke his head. If you want to cry, then cry. Little Bai stiffened for a moment. He pulled the corner of his lips, as though he wanted to smile. However, he did not have the slightest hint of a smile, as though he was trying to hide something. Grandma, what are you saying? I'm no longer a child. Why would I cry? Master will naturally leave when his lifespan ends. There's nothing to be sad about. Furthermore, although I'm his disciple, I've only met him once. For so many years, he has always been in closed-door training, and has never come out. Why would I cry? If that's really the case, wouldn't it be a joke? The more he spoke, the softer his voice became. At the very end, even he himself was unable to continue. Zhu Yao did not expose him either. With a wave of her hand, she set down a concealment formation in the surroundings. Don't worry. Now no one can see you if you are sad. If you're sad, I'll temporarily lend you my shoulder. After saying that, she turned around as well, and did not look at his face. After a while, only then did she hear the sound of him approaching. A furry head leaned over, and her shoulder was slowly dyed with moisture. Ha! Zhu Yao heaved a long sigh of relief. It's good that he cried out. This silly child. He was clearly very sad, yet he still said that he wasn't sad. Although his master was in closed-door training all year round, he treated him extremely well. Otherwise, Chu Jiang would not have brought him around so often. Although he felt regretful, he still held extreme respect and yearning towards his master whom he could not meet. Otherwise, he would not have such a radiant look every time he mentioned his master to her. A moment later, Zhu Yao felt that her shoulder was a little stiff. Only then did he sniff, and with a thick nasal voice he spoke. Grandma. Amen? Master is the best master. I believe in you. Grandma. Amen. You're the best grandma as well. Oh. Can you accompany Little Bai a little longer? All right. Little Bai's mood was depressed for an entire night. As a good elder, Zhu Yao had no choice but to accompany him for the entire night. When the sky brightened, Zhu Yao's entire body was already drenched in dew. As expected, being too popular wasn't a good thing either, right? Fortunately, Little Bai's mood had already calmed down, and he revealed a smile which he had not shown for a long time. Zhu Yao still wanted to say a few more words of encouragement, when a celestial crane flew over from the sky. Like a duck, it began to quack. Eat. Quack. Go home, quack. Go home. This celestial crane actually knows how to speak. Little Bai stared at that bird with a curious look. I wonder who it's calling home to eat? Ho ho ho. Zhu Yao's expression darkened. Master, can you change your communication tool? Who knows? It's getting late. The sky is still bright. Alright, it's getting late. The dew in the morning is heavy, let's head back first. She cast a dirt removal art, drying off the dew on their bodies, and then patted on his shoulder. Don't think too much. Go back and have a good sleep. Everything will be fine when you wake up. He obediently nodded. Don't worry, Grandma. I'm fine now. Zhu Yao carefully inspected him for a moment, and after realizing that he was really fine, she felt at ease. Just as she was about to send him to Principal Chu's place, and just as she was about to undo the concealment formation in the surroundings, she saw two people running over one after another. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, wait for me. The girl behind anxiously called out. It was actually Chu Yi. Zhu Yao's hands paused. After taking a closer look, the one who was hurrying ahead was actually Yi Qingsong. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. Chu Yi panted heavily as she grabbed onto Yi Qingsong, and said with a hint of complaint, "Why are you walking so quickly? How can I not be fast?" Yi Qingsong's brows tightly knitted. In the end, he could not help but support Chu Yi. Senior Marshal Sister Chu. How can you only tell me now that Reverend Chu Jing is Senior Marshal Brother Bai's personal succeeding master? Sect Master said that he did not return for an entire night. What if something happens to him? What could possibly happen to him? Chu Yi pouted. Senior Marshal Uncle Jing might be his master, but he has always been in closed-door training. Senior Marshal Brother Little Bai has only met him once. Don't worry, he won't mind. He won't take things too hard just because of Senior Marshal Uncle Jing, right? Zhu Yao frowned. She turned to look at Little Tyrant. As expected, his expression was ugly as well, and there was even a hint of disappointment in it. Senior Marshal Sister Chu Yi. Yi Qingsong frowned as well, as he glared at Chu Yi with a hint of anger. How can you say that? You've grown up with Senior Marshal Brother Bai, so you know him the best. After all, Reverend Chu Jing is Senior Marshal Brother Bai's personal succeeding master. To practitioners, don't you know how important a personal succeeding master is? How can Senior Marshal Brother Bai not mind? After exiting the secret realm back then, he and Senior Marshal Brother Bai could be considered to be sworn brothers of life and death. Even he could tell that he was a person who valued relationships and loyalty, so how could Senior Marshal Sister Chu say that? Chu Yi's eyes reddened, as she looked at Yi Qingsong a little pitifully. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I didn't mean it that way. I saw that you've been searching for him for a long time, so I was worried that you. Yi Qingsong was startled for a moment. Only then did his expression regain its warmth. With a hint of guilt, he said, Senior Marshal Sister, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have vented my anger on you. It would have been better if he had not consoled her. The moment he did, Chu Yi felt even more wronged. Her tears began to fall in an instant, as she turned around and threw herself into his embrace, beginning to sob. The corner of Zhu Yao's lips twitched. She turned to look at Little Bai, and then looked at the two people in front of her. Why did she feel that the atmosphere was a little strange? She couldn't immediately undo the formation, nor could she not undo it. Senior Marshal Sister. Yi Qingsong, however, very politely pushed Chu Yi away. It's inappropriate for us to do this. If Senior Marshal Brother Bai sees this, he will misunderstand. Chu Yi's expression stiffened for a moment, as she frowned. What does this have to do with Senior Marshal Brother Little Bai? You two aren't? Yi Qingsong's face was filled with shock. We've simply grown up together. A hint of something flashed past Chu Yi's face, but it disappeared in an instant. She did not explain much, and instead, looked at Yi Qingsong with glistening teardrops. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, do you hate me? Of course not. Yi Qingsong shook his head reflexively. For a moment, he felt a little troubled as well. Seeing that the two of them were about to say something, Little Bai, who had been standing at the side the entire time, suddenly pulled Zhu Yao. Grandma, let's head back. His expression was unclear, and his line of sight never once looked over there. Zhu Yao sighed and nodded. Amen. With a wave of her hand, she undid the concealment formation, and appeared at the scene of Yi Chu and Little Bai's confession. Two people suddenly appeared in front of them, scaring the two of them. You two. Granny Senior Marshal Brother Bai. The two of them immediately separated as though they were electrocuted. A hint of awkwardness flashed past their faces. Chapter 295. Senior Apprentice Brother Xiaobai. Chu Yi frowned. a trace of hesitation flashing across her face. She took a step forward as if she wanted to pull him back. Zhu Yao took a step to the side and cut in, blocking her line of sight. You. Chui looked at her angrily, displeased that she had been stopped. I say this martial grandniece. Zhu Yao chuckled at her, and then, she glanced at Yi Qingsong at the side. How about you conduct yourself? He couldn't be too greedy. Some things couldn't be given, so it was best to make it clear. My hometown has a special name for this kind of person. It's not a nice name. You definitely won't like it. It's called green tea bitch. I hope you're not one of them. So if you can't promise me anything, at least let him go. If you don't like him, don't ruin him, okay? After all, he's your senior martial brother with whom you've had a relationship for more than 10 years. This kind of unclear, seemingly liking, but also not liking, was the most hurtful. Chu Yi's face was a little pale. She seemed to understand something and slowly lowered her head. I will explain clearly. He wasn't completely hopeless. Granduncle. Yi Qingsong was a little anxious. He took a step forward. Don't misunderstand, I'm with. Stop. Zhu Yao raised her hand and made a pause gesture, stopping him from explaining. There's no need for you to tell me. You should tell little Bai. Whatever you decide, it has nothing to do with me. But, you better make it clear to him. If it drags on for too long and causes Xiaobai to cry. Her tone changed and her voice turned cold. I will beat you up. After saying that, he didn't care about their expressions and turned around to follow the stupid red-crowned crane that was still circling in the sky. Chu Yi was destined to be Yi Qingsong's sister. Even if the plot had changed, the two of them still ended up together. Therefore, Xiaobai was destined to become cannon fodder. They were still young, and their relationship had just budded. Rather than suffering pain in the future, it was better to withdraw from the relationship before it became too deep. It was better to suffer short-term pain than long-term pain. It wasn't appropriate for her to directly intervene in this kind of matter, so she could only give an appropriate reminder. As for Chu Yi, he could see through her heart with a single glance. On one hand, he could not bear to part with his childhood sweetheart relationship with Xiaobai. On the other hand, she was moved by Yi Qingsong. She herself was a little confused, but she didn't want to let go of either side. She originally wanted to drag it out until she could make a decision on her own. But at that time, he was afraid that one of them would be thoroughly injured. That was why she provoked her. Sister Chu Yi was not born a bad person, and could understand what she was saying. Seventh elder sister, catch it. Just as Zhu Yao returned to Skybound Peak, a green ball pounced towards her. She raised her hand and took over. Daodu, P called out. It snuggled into her embrace with all its might, while Lil cried. Water began to pour out of it, drenching her. Was she crying? What's wrong? A small phoenix with short claws rushed out of the house, its whole body covered in red fluff. His eyes lit up as he looked at Lil P, who was in her hands. He used all his strength to rub his little wings on his chubby body. Finally, with a flash of light, a fist-sized ball of fire appeared. It immediately waved its wings towards her. Seventh elder sister, hold on tight. I'm going to roast it. P shivered, and more water came out of her body, drenching her like a boiled chicken. Zhu Yao immediately snapped her fingers, extinguishing the sparks that little Eighth had painstakingly produced. She looked at him with a stern expression. Little Eighth, stop fooling around. Seventh elder sister, you're biased. Little Eighth complained, pointing at the pea in her hands. You're not even letting me eat a single pea. You're abusing an underage little animal. Zhu Yao flicked her finger towards his forehead, and little Eighth was instantly sent flying like an angry little bird. Amen, it was the red one. Enough. P had just awakened his spiritual consciousness not long ago, so his intelligence is limited. Stop scaring him all day long. Little Eighth rolled a few rounds before crawling back up. He indignantly glanced at the pea in her hands, snorted coldly, and turned his head away. However, he did not chase after her relentlessly. I'll let you off today. He gave I'm giving face to my seventh elder sister. Look. Zhu Yao felt a slight headache. She wondered what was wrong with this little Eighth. Usually he looked fine. According to his 2 lifetimes, even if he was not considered an adult, he could still be considered a young phoenix. Yet the moment he saw P, he would go crazy, thinking of various ways to scare him to the point of jumping up and down. In the beginning, it was still all right. He was only the size of a palm, and even if he wanted to chew on it, he couldn't be bothered with him. In the past few days, he had grown a full size, and his godly energy had recovered a little as well. Thus he began to have wicked thoughts. 7th elder sister. Little 8th once again rubbed against her with his short claws, and said mysteriously, "Say, when do you think the far ancient high god will come out from this stupid P?" When? Naturally, it would be when she calls him master. Zhu Yao sized little 8th up. "Why are you asking this?" He slightly turned his head away, and said a little flustered, I just have some things I want to ask him. He's a high god, so he definitely knows everything." Zhu Yao frowned. "Little 8th, he's not the far ancient high god." Ah. Little 8th was startled, and then anxiously said, "He's clearly the high god, and 7th elder sister calls him master as well. How can he not be?" "He's indeed my master." Zhu Yao sighed and explained. "But he's not my master. He's my master Yu Yan, not the far ancient high god. Master he." She paused for a moment, and then slowly said a moment later, "Master is no longer around." Little 8th lowered his head in disappointment. His entire bird was a little dispirited, and he lightly muttered, "The high god is no longer around. Then who am I supposed to ask?" "Just what do you want to ask?" Zhu Yao stroked his feathers. "Tell 7th elder sister. Perhaps I might know?" Little 8th raised his head and glanced at her, before immediately turning away. He continued to mutter, "TCH, a phoenix as handsome as me doesn't even know. How would you know when you're so ugly?" Zhu Yao raised her hand and slapped towards his bird head. "What kind of words are you talking about?" Little 8th hugged his head with his 2 wings, and leaped a few steps away. With a reproachful look he said, "7th elder sister, you can't blame me for being ugly, right? My bad temper. If you have the guts, don't run." The little red bird slipped away, and instantly disappeared without a trace. "Don't let me catch you again." Zhu Yao glared at the direction it escaped to, and then looked at Peepee in her hand, just when she was about to call her master out to discuss some matters. Her divine sense unintentionally scanned someone outside the door, and it was even someone she was familiar with. "Grand Marshal Ant, disciple Yi Qingsong has something important to discuss with you." "Why is the bug student here? Didn't they just separate earlier?" Zhu Yao's heart was filled with doubts. Keeping the peepee, she walked out. Yi Qingsong was currently waiting outside the door, though his brows were tightly furrowed, looking as though he had a lot on his mind. It couldn't be because of girly Chu Yi, right? Could it be that girly Chu Yi abandoned him and chose Little Bai? This doesn't make sense at all. Grand Marshal Ant. Seeing her come out, Yi Qingsong's brows relaxed a little. He respectfully bowed to her. "Is there something you need from me? Say it then. What's there to be unhappy about? Say it to cheer her up." He was the best at consoling a broken-hearted youth. Yi Qingsong hesitated for a moment, and then said with a conflicted look, "There's something this disciple can't shake in his heart. I hope that Grand Marshal Ant can guide me." "What is it?" His brows furrowed even tighter. He looked at his surroundings a little anxiously, as though he was afraid of something. Zhu Yao placed down a formation with a wave of her hand, isolating their auras and figures. She silently shook her head in her heart. Youngsters these days are so prideful. Why don't they think about it? It's not like you're a superstar who would be interested in your love life. Can you tell me now? Yi Qingsong gritted his teeth. As though he had finally made up his mind, he took out a round cup-like mystic artifact from his bosom. The token of love with girly Chu-Yi? Why did she feel it looked a little familiar? Granny. To tell you the truth, back then in that secret realm, after Senior Marshal Brother Little Bai and I got separated from you, I accidentally picked this up. I picked it up by accident. Zhu Yao was startled, as she fiercely stared at that cup-shaped mystic artifact. Medicine King Cauldron. The hell? Wasn't this the male lead's pellet refining godly artifact? Granny recognizes this item? Yi Qingsong's face was filled with shock. MN. Not only did she recognize it, she had already seen it countless times in the scenario, alright? The Medicine King Cauldron can increase the success rate of pellet refining by 30%, and it can be considered as a divine artifact. Since you're able to shrink it to such a small size, most likely, you have already formed a blood contract with it, and it can be stored in your divine sense, right? Yi Qingsong was startled for a moment, as though he did not expect that she would know about it so clearly. You picked this thing up in the secret realm. A place like that. Zhu Yao glanced at him, and continued. You want to ask me? You want to ask me if forming a blood contract with it will affect you in any way? Yi Qingsong's face paled, and he immediately explained. Granny, I didn't intentionally hide it from you. It's just that I wasn't clear on what it was in the beginning. My blood had unintentionally sprinkled onto its body, and only recently did I realize that it was in my divine sense. Don't be nervous. Zhu Yao found it a little funny. It's not like you have the obligation to report everything to me. I won't blame you. Granny. He had a conflicted look, as though he did not know what to say. All right. Zhu Yao patted on his shoulders. This was something that belonged to him in the first place, and after going around in circles, it was still picked up by him. Don't worry, that pervert in the secret realm. I'm talking about that heretic practitioner who refines beasts. Although he's not a good person, this is a good item, so you can keep it at ease. There isn't any bad aura on it either, so I believe it won't affect you in any way. In the future, you have to become a pellet refinement master. You know? Yi Qingsong was startled, as though he never expected that she would so easily resolve the matter that he had been worried about for such a long time. Actually, ever since he bound this cauldron, he faintly sensed that it was an extraordinary item. However, he was afraid that it would harm his body, so he had been hesitating on whether he should reveal this matter. Would it attract the covetous eyes of others? He did not have anyone he could trust by his side either. After hesitating for a long time, he realized that he could only ask his granny, who had been protecting him throughout the entire journey in the secret realm. He thought that if he were to say it, even if she would not have any ill intentions at the very least, she would be a little angry at his act of hiding it from her. He never expected that she would not mind it in the slightest, and would brush it off so easily. In her eyes, there was not even a single hint of desire. It was as though no matter how heaven-defying an item he picked up, it would have nothing to do with her. At that moment, his heart was filled with joy, yet he faintly felt a hint of indescribable disappointment. Granny! Actually, other than this cauldron, I picked up something else as well. He could not help but blurt out the words that he was not prepared to say even if he was beaten to death. Something else. It couldn't be that pellet ancestor's inheritance, right? He then took out a small jade tablet. Inside are pellet refining methods, and a few pellet recipes. Oh, as expected, it's that inheritance. Work hard, young man. Yi Qingsong was startled, and was a little doubtful. That's it. Zhu Yao sized him up in a strange manner. What else do you want? You can't be asking me to sponsor you, right? That's right. At the very least, he called her granny. Gritting her teeth, she silently took out a piece of spirit stone tile. She had dug it out from the floorboards of the great hall with much difficulty, and stuffed it into his hands. With a heavy tone she said, Young man, I can only support you up to here. Why don't you go buy some medicinal ingredients to level up? He looked at her as though he was dumbfounded. Could it be that it was still not enough? Hey, you have to learn to be content, young man. I really don't have any left. I still have to return and dig at the floorboards. It's really troublesome. Yi Qingsong looked at her dumbfoundedly for a moment, and then he suddenly burst out into laughter. The more he laughed, the louder he laughed. In the end, he laughed so hard that he was about to bend over. Zhu Yao's expression darkened. Why did she feel a little displeased? Hey, young man, that's enough. Leaving some face for his elders, what was with him laughing like that? Granny, you. He finally managed to stop his laughter, and shook his head. With a hint of understanding, and a hint of self-mockery, he said, Granny, you really make Chingsong feel ashamed of my inferiority. Earlier he was actually worried that she would covet his things, and was worried that she would kill him and steal his treasures. Looking at it now, it was extremely laughable. Or perhaps, only people with dark hearts would think that others were the same as them, right? Is there anything else? Zhu Yao glared at him a little displeased. He took a deep breath, straightened his expression, and respectfully bowed to her. Thank you, Granny, for your teachings. What did I teach you? This disciple shall take his leave. However, he did not plan on saying anything else, as he turned around and headed down the mountain. He left behind a confused Zhu Yao. Just what in the world was this guy doing here? Was he purposely showing off his cheat? Amazing. As expected, bugs were really annoying. This time, what are your plans? A white figure appeared next to Zhu Yao. Yu Yan glanced at the departing figure, and then reached out to stroke his disciple's hair. Just as he was about to let go, after pondering for a moment, he took the opportunity to hold on to her hand, and intertwined their fingers. Master! Zhu Yao turned around and pounced over. Her heart was so tired that she leaned on his shoulder. She needed some motivation. Ha! Youngsters nowadays are getting harder and harder to deal with. Why? Zhu Yao pouted. He's a good person. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.